As soon as the azure flames came into contact with the devilish ape, the colorful light around its body was suddenly ignited, thereby plunging the dried corpse into a ball of scorching flames. At this moment, Han Li's nascent soul also sat down in midair in a cross-legged manner, and it closed its eyes as it made a strange hand seal. As for Han Li's physical body, it remained completely still, as if it had entered a deep meditative state. The azure flames burned for 3 days and 3 nights at the nascent soul's behest. Even with Han Li's current cultivation base, he was still beginning to struggle on the final day, and the stream of azure flames became a little thinner. Thankfully, the secret technique was finally completed at the conclusion of the 3rd day. Letter 1D4BB, letter 1D4C7, letter 1D452, letter 1D626, letter 1D638, letter 1D452, letter 1D4B8, letter 2134, letter 1D62E. An explosion rang out from within the azure flames, following which a plume of black smoke dispersed through the air. The devilish ape's corpse, which had remained completely unchanged for 3 days prior to this, suddenly exploded into nothingness. In its place was a shimmering fist-sized ball that was hovering inside the azure flames. The nascent soul opened its eyes and cast its gaze toward the shimmering object as a smile appeared on its face. At the same time, the stream of nascent flames erupting from its mouth ceased, following which the nascent soul vanished amid a flash of golden and azure light. In the next instant, Han Li's physical body also opened its eyes before sweeping a sleeve through the air. A swath of azure light swept forth, snuffing out all of the remaining nascent flames and revealing the object inside. This was a crystalline object that was shimmering with crimson light. Han Li narrowed his eyes as he flicked a finger, and a concentrated blast of wind erupted forth before striking the crimson crystal. The crystal shattered with a crisp crack, and a stream of extremely viscous dark red liquid flowed out from within. As soon as the liquid was exposed to the air, it materialized into a miniature dark red monkey that was around half a foot tall. The monkey let loose a loud cry, and a primordial aura that was quite startling even to Han Li erupted from its body. Immediately thereafter, dark red light flashed, and the miniature monkey disappeared into the distance. However, a dull thump then immediately rang out from one of the walls of the secret chamber as the ball of red light crashed directly into it, only to be repelled by the power of the restriction. The red light reverted back into its monkey form, before immediately flying toward another direction like a headless fly. However, Han Li was prepared this time, and he flipped a hand over to produce a thin jade vial amid a flash of white light. He tossed the vial up into the air, and the opening of the vial aimed itself toward a certain direction with white light shimmering faintly within it. A plume of white threads then shot forth out of the opening, ensnaring the miniature monkey in the air before drawing it back into the jade vial with ease. Han Li then raised an arm and made a grabbing motion, drawing the jade vial into his grasp from afar. He injected his spiritual sense into the vial, and an excited look flashed through his eyes moments later. Brilliant. As expected, this really is the true spirit blood of the giant mountain ape. To think that it's of such a high degree of purity as well. If I were to refine it, the resulting transformation will be even more powerful than my Kun-Peng transformation, Han Li murmured to himself in an elated manner. He then made a grabbing motion again, and 2 talismans, one golden and one silver, appeared in his grasp before being plastered onto the jade vial. After that, he carefully stowed the jade vial away. Even though he'd extracted the true spirit blood, he naturally couldn't refine it right away. After blasting nascent flames at the devilish ape's corpse for the past 3 days, he'd expended a lot of magic power, so he had to rest and recover first. After consuming some pills, he pulled out a pair of spirit stones from his storage bracelet before entering a meditative state. A day later, he concluded his meditation, and his magic power had already fully recovered. After basking in the renewed abundance of magic power in his body, he smiled as he flipped his hand over to summon a shimmering golden blade segment that was around half a foot in length. This was naturally none other than the damaged profound heavenly treasure he'd obtained from the devilish ape. Back when he'd first obtained the treasure, he didn't get a chance to conduct an in-depth inspection, and he certainly wasn't going to bring out this treasure on the way back to Cloud City with Xianxia by his side. Thus, Han Li began to stroke the slightly bumpy patterns and runes on the surface of the blade segment, and a contemplative look appeared on his face. He tried to inject his spiritual sense into it on several occasions, only to have his spiritual sense completely repelled by a mysterious force, just as what had happened when he tried the same thing on the profound heavenly fruit. At present, The treasure had no spiritual chi within it whatsoever, and it looked like a piece of scrap metal. However, it was none other than this nondescript blade segment that had unleashed devastating power. If it weren't for the fact that the profound heavenly fruit had been stimulated to become the profound heavenly sword again, he most likely would have perished to this blade segment. Thinking back to the astonishingly powerful attack it had unleashed, Han Li began to carefully inspect it using his bright-sight spirit eyes. As expected, he was able to see directly into the blade segment using his spirit eye ability, but he wasn't able to find anything aside from countless tiny golden runes. Han Li raised an eyebrow upon seeing this. He didn't know whether its interior had always been like this, or if it had only become like this after he'd injected the power of his projection into it. However, he merely gave a nonchalant smile a moment later. It didn't really matter to him what the blade segment had looked like in the past, as long as he could use it as one of his trump cards. Even though he'd used the power of his true devil projection to fuel the profound heavenly fruit during his battle against that devilish ape, thereby allowing him to unleash an attack without losing a vast amount of blood essence. The fact that close to half of his projection's power had been absorbed by the sword was still quite a dire consequence that would take a long time to recover from. Besides, the profound heavenly fruit had sealed itself into his arm again, and he was still unable to summon it at will, so who knew if it would appear again the next time he found himself in a dire situation. He didn't want to depend on such an unreliable trump card to save his life. This trump card was indeed unfathomably powerful and had even saved his life on 2 occasions, but it was simply too much of a gamble to continue counting on it. In comparison, this blade segment was significantly less powerful than the profound heavenly sword, but it was exactly because of this that using it would expend much less energy, and it would most likely be something that he could use at will. With that in mind, blue light swirled within Han Li's eyes, and he was planning to give this a try. He tossed the golden blade segment into the air, then made a hand seal, and brilliant golden light radiated from his body as golden scales surfaced over his skin. Immediately thereafter, a shimmering golden projection with 3 heads and 6 arms appeared behind him. At first glance, it appeared that the projection seemed to have returned to its original size, but upon closer inspection, one would discover that its body was a lot more indistinct compared to in the past, and the golden light that it was emanating was also rather faint. As soon as the Provenance True Devil projection appeared, one of the arms reached out to grab onto the golden blade segment. Han Li took a deep breath, and the projection up above began to glow with scintillating golden light at his behest. At the same time, countless specks of golden light appeared in midair nearby, instantly filling the entire secret chamber. Han Li let loose a low cry upon seeing this, and the projection overhead instantly swung the golden blade segment gently through the air. A piercing screeching rang out as all of the golden light around the projection's body surged toward the blade segment in a frenzy. At the same time, the specks of golden light in the air tremored before forming a series of golden runes of different sizes. These runes then also surged toward the blade segment as if they'd been summoned, then disappeared into it without a trace. Thus, the entire blade segment was inundated by dazzling golden light, and the piercing screech also drew to an abrupt halt. At this point, the projection had shrunk slightly in size. In the next instant, the golden light around the blade segment vanished, and the missing upper half of the blade returned, thereby temporarily repairing the weapon. Furthermore, 3 faint golden runes had also appeared over its surface. Han Li looked up at the golden blade in the air, and he could sense the astonishing spiritual pressure emanating from it, as well as his magic power rapidly pouring out of his body, but a hint of elation appeared on his face. As expected, he really could use his projection to control this treasure. Even though some of his spiritual power and the power of his projection had still been absorbed, the amount absorbed was within an acceptable range to Han Li. All of a sudden, his eyes narrowed as he cast his gaze toward the 3 golden runes on the blade. It was quite clear that these 3 runes were of the same type as the runes on the profound heavenly sword. This is golden seal text. As expected, this really is a profound heavenly treasure, Han Li murmured to himself, but he wasn't overly surprised by this discovery. However, he then suddenly seemed to have sensed something, and he abruptly turned his attention to his golden protection. There, he discovered that even though the golden light emanating from the projection wasn't surging toward the blade as rapidly as it had in the past, there were still traces of it slowly injecting itself into the golden blade. It appeared that once this damaged, profound heavenly treasure adopted its original form, it would constantly absorb the essential power of his projection. Han Li was rather taken aback upon seeing this, and his brows furrowed as he immediately pointed a finger up at the projection. The projection immediately released the golden blade from its grasp at his behest, following which its two sets of clear faces opened their mouths in unison, blasting forth gusts of golden winds that swept up the golden blade in a flash. A resounding boom rang out as the upper half of the blade was swept away by the winds, disintegrating into specks of golden light, which flew back toward the projection. After absorbing those specks of golden light, the projection swelled slightly and returned to its original size. Meanwhile, the golden blade had reverted back to its incomplete form, and it fell straight down from above. Han Li waved a hand toward it, and golden light flashed as the blade segment vanished into thin air. This damaged, profound heavenly treasure was definitely powerful enough to be considered as a new trump card, so he naturally had to stow it away carefully. Thus, Han Li had obtained two extremely precious treasures in a row, and he was naturally very pleased. However, that wasn't the extent of the fruits that he'd reaped from the Golden Devil mountain ranges. After a brief pause, Han Li rustled a sleeve, and two more objects flew out from within before settling right in front of him. One of them was shimmering with golden light, while the other was radiating a faint white glow. These were none other than a blue bead and a white jade box. The two items hovered in midair in a stationary manner before him. Han Li raised a hand to draw the blue bead into his grasp to find that the object was translucent and extremely smooth, as if it were made from polished glass. The pure water attribute spiritual chi emanating from it seemed to indicate that it was a pure water attribute treasure. He held the bead in between two of his fingers and inspected it over and over again with his spiritual sense, as well as his spirit eyes. After a long while, a thought suddenly occurred to him, and a peculiar look appeared on his face. Could it be that legendary object? Han Li murmured to himself before azure light flashed from his two fingers, sending a burst of pure spiritual power into the bead. Spiritual light swirled around the bead's surface, and a burst of blue watery light erupted from it. Immediately thereafter, the blue light transformed into an extremely thin crystalline film of water that completely enshrouded Han Li's body within. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, and he immediately opened his mouth to blast forth a streak of azure light, which struck the water barrier in a flash. Following a metallic clang, the azure light was repelled and revealed to a small azure sword that was several inches in length. It was as if the sword had struck an impenetrable fortress and was unable to leave so much as a single scratch on the water barrier. Considering how sharp and destructive his azure bamboo cloudswarm swords were, Han Li was naturally extremely surprised by this development. An incredulous look appeared on his face as he exclaimed, "This is a glazed water bead." However, in the next instant, he recomposed himself before opening his mouth to swallow his azure sword again, then pointed a finger at the water barrier around him. Red light flashed, and an egg-sized ball of crimson flames emerged from his fingertip before striking the water barrier in a soundless manner. As soon as it came into contact with the barrier, the fireball was immediately extinguished without being able to unleash any of its power whatsoever. Han Li raised an eyebrow as he swept a sleeve toward the water barrier, and a clear cry rang out as a silver and white fire raven emerged from within his sleeve. The spirit-engulfing fire raven flew in a circle around Han Li before spreading its wings and hurtling directly toward the water barrier. Silver flames and blue light intertwined amid a dull thump, following which both sides tremored, and the fire raven was repelled. It appeared that even his spirit-engulfing heavenly flames wouldn't be able to do anything to this water barrier in a short time. There's no mistaking it, this really is a glazed water bead. Han Li murmured to himself before sweeping his sleeve through the air again to stow the silver fire raven away. He then looked down at the bead in his hand with a scorching gaze in his eyes. However, moments later, the fanaticism in his eyes gradually faded. It's a pity that I'm not using a water attribute cultivation art, so I'll only be able to use this as a normal treasure. Otherwise, if I could refine this bead and slowly absorb it, I'd be able to attain the legendary glazed water body. Han Li sighed with an extremely disappointed look on his face. If he were to attain the glazed water body, he'd be able to make significantly faster progress when using any water attribute cultivation art. Furthermore, it was said that attaining the Constitution could even allow him to master a certain water domain, which was imbued with the power of the laws of heaven and earth. This was a treasure that would be extremely sought after even to body integration stage beings. Han Li waved his hand, and the blue light emanating from the bead immediately faded. The water barrier nearby reverted back into a stream of watery light that was absorbed by the bead in his hand, and he sat on the spot with a contemplative look in his eyes. All of a sudden, a thought seemed to have occurred to him, and his eyes immediately lit up. He made a hand seal with one hand, and a blurry white shadow flew forth from his waist before transforming into a white snake that was around a foot in length. This was none other than the sentient puppet that Han Li had named Doll. Due to the fact that this puppet only possessed spatial tempering stage power, it wouldn't have been very useful during his battles in the Golden Devil Mountain range, so Han Li hadn't summoned it this entire time. After all, he valued this puppet more for its spiritual nature and its potential for further evolution, so he didn't want to damage it if at all avoidable. With that in mind, Han Li began to chant something before pointing a finger at the puppet. White light flashed from the snake's body, and it transformed into a beautiful woman. The woman drifted down gently from up above while focusing TS gaze on Han Li. However, it was completely expressionless, and there was a burst of white glacial chi emanating from its body, making it appear as if it had been entirely constructed from profound ice. Han Li sensed the astonishing glacial chi emanating from the woman's body, then glanced at the blue bead in his hand with a hesitant look on his face. Ice attribute power stems from water attribute power. I wonder if getting this ice attribute sentient puppet to carry this glazed water bead for extended periods of time would be beneficial in any way, Han Li murmured to himself. After a brief hesitation, he finally made his decision, and he tossed the blue bead toward the puppet. The glazed water bead transformed into a ball of blue light that hurtled directly toward the woman, and before even reaching the puppet, a burst of extremely pure water attribute spiritual chi swept toward it. Strangely enough, after coming into contact with this rich spiritual chi, Doll's wooden expression suddenly stirred slightly, and it turned its attention away from Han Li, focusing its gaze intently on the oncoming bead instead. All of a sudden, it opened its mouth to expel a burst of white light, which swept up the bead in a flash before drawing the bead into its mouth. A layer of blue light suddenly surfaced over Doll's pale face, and its brows even furrowed slightly in a rather humanized display of discomfort. However, its expression then quickly eased, and the blue light on its face disappeared as it reverted back to its wooden expressionless self. Han Li was naturally appraising Doll this entire time, and he stroked his chin upon seeing this, but he wasn't overly disappointed. Even if there were benefits to be reaped by Doll from the glazed water bead, there was no way that these benefits would show themselves in a short time. Even so, he didn't immediately stow the sentient puppet away. Instead, he pointed at the stone door of his secret chamber and ordered, "I have to keep cultivating in seclusion. You're free to go anywhere in the cave abode, and you can look after my medicine garden in my stead." The puppet didn't possess a high level of spiritual nature, but it was naturally able to comprehend such simple orders. Furthermore, only by regularly keeping a sentient puppet around rather than storing it away somewhere could there be a possibility that its spiritual nature would develop over time. This was rather similar to nurturing spirit beasts. Doll nodded silently before vanishing through the stone door in a wraith-like manner. It appeared that the restriction Han Li had set up posed no impediment to it at all. Han Li was just about to withdraw the restriction in order to allow Doll to leave, and his expression faltered upon seeing this. At the same time, he was beginning to look forward to seeing what this sentient puppet would become after tapping into its evolutionary potential. After that, he cast his gaze toward the jade box that was hovering in midair. There were several restriction talismans plastered all over the jade box, all of which were shimmering with spiritual light. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly as he cast an incantation seal, which vanished into the jade box in a flash. Spiritual light began to swirl around the surface of the box, following which the restriction talismans were peeled off in a soundless manner. The lid of the box flew off of its own accord, and a ball of silver light shot forth from within before immediately flying away. However, Han Li was already prepared for this scenario. An azure light flashed from his other hand as he made a grabbing motion. The streak of silver light was instantly immobilized by a burst of immense invisible power, then forcibly drawn to Han Li and revealed itself to be a white jade badge. There were many silver runes flashing all over the surface of the jade badge, and it was none other than the outer page of the golden jade tome that Han Li had obtained from within the devilish ape's crimson bed. Letter 1D65B, letter 1D4FB, letter 1D486, letter 1D4E, letter 1D498, letter 1D65A, letter 1D4EC, letter 1D490, letter 1D662. A tool refinement method known as the profound heavenly tool refinement technique was recorded on this page. The methods enclosed all seem to be far too extraordinary for Han Li to attempt at his current cultivation base, but he hadn't actually had a chance to take a good look at it. Now that he was back in his cave abode, he naturally had to study it carefully to see if he could glean some useful insights from it. Han Li grabbed onto the Jade badge before pressing it against his forehead, then seeping his spiritual sense into it. After that, he closed his eyes, and his body fell completely still. Time passed by slowly, and Han Li remained in this state for a remarkably long time. After over half a day had passed, his body finally stirred slightly, and he opened his eyes to reveal a hint of residual shock deep within his pupils. Integrated 5 Extremes Mountain. I can't believe there's a refinement method that can fuse 5 top-grade divine spirit treasures into one. That's absolutely incredible. If this method is truly feasible, as long as I have enough time and money, I really could perhaps refine an artificial profound heavenly treasure. But then again, it's not very plausible to gather 5 top-grade divine spirit treasures, even for an entire ordinary race. Refining 5 treasures of such a high caliber isn't very feasible, but if I can refine even 2 and fuse them together, the resulting treasure would still be unimaginably powerful. Han Li murmured to himself with a contemplative look on his face. It turned out that in the final section of this profound heavenly tool refinement technique, there were specific methods enclosed through which one could refine artificial profound heavenly treasures. The other few methods all required materials that were either impossible to find in the spirit realm, like refined stars, or materials that Han Li had never even heard of. Only the materials and refinement method required to refine this integrated 5 Extremes Mountain seemed to be viable in the spirit realm. In order to use the refinement method, one had to at least be at the body integration stage, and the materials required to refine this treasure were actual mountains. Of course, they couldn't just be any mountain. They had to be mountains that possessed several rare attributes and special abilities. The divine essence-effused mountain just so happened to be one of them. Of course, the divine essence-effused mountain that he possessed still couldn't compare with the one that was stipulated on the Jade page. He had to add many precious materials into it, then refine it using a special method for an extended period of time, which would significantly enhance the power of the mountain. In any case, he possessed one of the main materials required to use this refinement method, which was why he was so tempted to explore it. As for the other 4 mountains, one of them had to contain a vast amount of Great North Essence light, and the Great North Essence mountain fit that criterion. Han Li held the Jade badge in his hand and fell into deep thought again. Han Li already had a profound heavenly treasure and a damaged profound heavenly treasure, so he shouldn't have been very interested in creating an artificial profound heavenly treasure. However, one of the abilities of the integrated 5 Extremes Mountain was that it could nullify the power of lightning tribulations by close to half. Even if he couldn't gather all 5 mountains, refining just 2 or 3 of those mountains could still help him resist the power of his future lightning tribulations. At present, he was already a spatial tempering stage cultivator, so he had to transcend a major heavenly tribulation once every 3,000 years. The time period in between tribulations appeared to have been extended, but major heavenly tribulations were far more devastating than the minor heavenly tribulations that deity transformation and nascent soul cultivators had to deal with. For most spatial tempering cultivators, they could generally safely transcend their first major heavenly tribulation, but the death began to spike with each successive major heavenly tribulation. Those who could reach their 4th or 5th major heavenly tribulations were all old monsters who had lived for over 10,000 years, but even among them, there were only 20% to 30% of beings who would be able to transcend those tribulations. As for the major heavenly tribulations after the 5th one, the death rate exceeded 70% to 80%. It was said that ever since the human race had appeared in the spirit realm, there had been no spatial tempering cultivators that had managed to transcend 9 major heavenly tribulations. All beings who had transcended 9 or more major heavenly tribulations were all cultivators at the body integration stage or above. Even spatial tempering stage beings who were far more powerful than other beings of the same cultivation base would undoubtedly perish if they couldn't reach the body integration stage prior to their 9th major heavenly tribulation. Of course, this was only applicable to human cultivators. As for metamorphosis stage demonic cultivators, their situation was quite similar to that of the human race when it came to heavenly tribulations. However, due to the differences in lifespans, cultivation arts used, and inherent aptitude among beings of different races, the intervals between heavenly tribulations and how devastating these tribulations were differed drastically. It was said that for foreign beings that were inherently far more powerful than humans, their tribulations would only arrive once every 10,000 years, but the ferocity of these tribulations also far exceeded that of heavenly tribulations experienced by human cultivators. There were also some beings with far shorter lifespans than even humans, and their heavenly tribulations arrived once every few decades. Needless to say, these heavenly tribulations were far less devastating than those experienced by human cultivators. After reaching the body integration stage, each major heavenly tribulation became far more perilous than compared to spatial tempering stage tribulations. Each major heavenly tribulation at that point was essentially a trial of life and death, and those who didn't pass would perish, while those who did would survive and experience slight boosts in their cultivation bases. There were even some special cases where beings had broken through their bottlenecks during lightning tribulation. As such, beings at the body integration stage or above very rarely showed themselves unless there were extremely important matters they had to attend to. Almost all of their time was dedicated to cultivation and making preparations for their next trial of life and death. Of course, major heavenly tribulations didn't consist entirely of lightning tribulations, but one thing was for certain. Lightning tribulations were included in and were the main constituents of all major heavenly tribulations. As such, the integrated 5 extremes mountain's ability to buffer the power of lightning tribulations was naturally extremely useful. If he could refine such a treasure, he'd essentially be significantly increasing his chances of successfully transcending future tribulations. However, aside from the divine essence-effused mountain that he possessed already, Han Li had no idea where he could find the other 4 mountains. Furthermore, aside from those 4 immensely powerful mountains, all of the secondary materials that had to be infused into these mountains were also extremely rare. Some of them were materials that Han Li had only ever heard of, yet never seen before, and that was quite disheartening to him. After contemplating this matter in his secret chamber for a long while, Han Li's expression gradually eased. He glanced at the jade page in his hand before flipping his other hand over to produce a jade box. He placed the jade page into the box, then plastered a few restriction talismans onto the box before stowing it away. Even though he already had the refinement method, there was no guarantee whatsoever that he'd come across any of other required mountains in the future. As such, there was no point in becoming overly obsessed with this treasure, as luck would most likely play a huge role in whether he could gather all of the required materials. Having come to terms with this, Han Li sat in silence for a while longer before finally recovering to a completely placid mental state. After that, he rustled a sleeve, and a bracelet flew out from within. Spiritual light radiated from the bracelet, and a ball of black light flew out from within before landing gently onto the ground. Within the black light, there was a small black monkey that was huddled up into a motionless ball. It was none other than the weeping soul beast. After suddenly putting on an extraordinary display of power to kill that cave spirit, which had been possessed by the soul fragment of the heavenly devilish sovereign, the monkey had fallen unconscious and was still yet to awaken. Han Li's expression darkened slightly upon seeing this, and he made grabbing motion toward the small beast. A burst of azure light surged forth from between his fingers, sweeping up the little monkey before drawing it to him. Han Li's eyes narrowed as he inspected the monkey, and a series of translucent threads shot forth from his glabella before silently embedding themselves into the beast's body. In order to ascertain the weeping soul beast's current condition, Han Li had manifested threads with his spiritual sense in order to conduct a more thorough examination. Thus, the crystalline threads disappeared into the small monkey's body, yet the weeping soul beast displayed no reaction to this. Meanwhile, Han Li's eyes were already half closed as he began to inspect the beast's condition using those spiritual sense threads. After a long while, an incredulous look appeared on Han Li's face as he exclaimed, "Impossible! How could something like this have happened?" Not only had the weeping soul beast recovered all of the magic power it had lost, its body was a lot more powerful than before, and the magic power within its meridians had also become far more abundant. Furthermore, during the period in which he was conducting his inspection, The weeping soul beast's body was still changing at a slow and steady rate. Is it about to evolve again? Han Li appraised the little monkey with a perplexed look on his face. The weeping soul beast hadn't devoured anything that would result in these changes, so where were these enhancements coming from? Could it be that all of this had something to do with the events that had unfolded in the Golden Devil Mountain ranges? Han Li was quite intrigued as he continued to inject more of his spiritual sense into the weeping soul beast's body, trying to make sense of its current condition. All of a sudden, Han Li's expression changed slightly as he exclaimed, "Wait, what's this? I'm sure it didn't have this thing in its body before." Deep within the weeping soul beast's dantian, he discovered countless transparent particles that were barely visible. These particles were extremely discreet, and each of them was only around a tenth of the size of a grain of rice. They gave off no aura whatsoever, but they'd been completely enveloped by the weeping soul beast's soul-devouring light, and it seemed that they were constantly being refined. Upon witnessing this peculiar phenomenon, Han Li almost immediately thought back to when the weeping soul beast had slain the cave spirit, then devoured its soul. Could it be that these particles were formed by the soul of the cave spirit, or stemmed from the heavenly devilish sovereign's soul fragment? If that were the case, why hadn't the weeping soul beast ever had such a reaction to devouring other ghostly beings in the past? Could it be? All of a sudden, a thought occurred to Han Li, and his expression changed drastically. He hurriedly manipulated one of the spiritual sense threads within the weeping soul beast's body to wrap around one of the particles in its dantian, then immediately pulled the particle out of its body. The particle that had been drawn out of the weeping soul beast's body was barely visible, and the spiritual sense thread disappeared in a flash as Han Li pointed a finger at the particle in a solemn manner. An azure thread shot forth from his fingertip, binding tightly onto the particle before drawing it right under Han Li's eyes. Brilliant blue light erupted from within his pupils as he activated his bright-sight spirit eyes to their maximal extent, then appraised the particle with an intense, unblinking gaze. After a long while, Han Li exhaled as he flipped his hand over to produce a thumb-sized jade vial. The azure thread swayed before carrying the translucent particle into the small vial, following which the vial disappeared in a flash. After that, Han Li quickly swept a sleeve through the air, and the spirit beast bracelet that was hovering in midair expelled a burst of spiritual light, which drew the weeping soul beast back into the bracelet. Han Li then stowed the treasure away before rising to his feet and hurriedly departing from his secret chamber. Almost as soon as he emerged from behind the stone door, Han Li transmitted an instruction to Doll, asking it to look after the cave abode. Immediately thereafter, he flew through the air as a streak of azure light, appearing outside his cave abode in mere moments. He then quickly descended to the foot of the mountain before hailing a beast-drawn carriage and giving the driver an instruction to take him to the center of the city. During the next dozen or so days, Han Li visited all of the shops in Cloud City in which tomes were being sold, and selectively purchased a large number of tomes that he'd never paid any attention to in the past. These tomes covered a vast variety of topics, some of which detailed cultivation arts and secret techniques, while others were merely general books that introduced all types of strange objects and peculiar events. After taking all of these tomes back to his cave abode, Han Li immediately began to read through them at an astonishing speed, as if he were trying to find something within them. After an entire night had passed, he emerged from the secret chamber with a disappointed look on his face. He then left his cave abode again and purchased another large batch of tomes from all over Cloud City. Thus, 5 or 6 days passed by, and Han Li repeated this process day after day. The number of tomes that he'd purchased and the number of spirit stones that he'd spent on them had both reached astonishing sums. However, after returning from another tome shopping spree, Han Li picked up an antiquated jade badge as he sat in his secret chamber, and as he swept his spiritual sense into the jade badge, an elated look suddenly appeared on his face. "I found it. True Kirin essence is indeed something that isn't very well known, but I knew there would be some records of it on some ancient tomes," Han Li murmured to himself before focusing his attention on the jade badge again. Thus, Han Li sat in a stationary manner, seemingly completely absorbed by the jade badge in his hand. After a long while, he heaved a long sigh before tossing the jade badge onto the ground with an extremely dejected look on his face. Letter 1D557, letter 1D69B, letter 1D68T, letter 1D680, letter 1D430, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D554, letter 1D428, letter 1D55E. How could this be? I can't believe I missed out on such a brilliant opportunity just like that. Han Li sighed in a forlorn manner. He then flipped his hand over to produce the small vial that was carrying the translucent particle. After removing the lid of the vial, the translucent particle slowly flew out from within before hovering above the vial's opening. Han Li appraised the seemingly ordinary particle, and a wry smile appeared on his face. According to the information he'd gleaned from the Jade badge, this so-called true Kirin essence did indeed exist, and it was formed by the wisp of chaotic chi that appeared during the birth of true spirit beings. If a normal being were to devour it, they'd experience incredible benefits. The essence wouldn't be able to allow one to evolve into a true spirit being, but it could completely transform their bodies and drastically enhance their cultivation bases. It was quite possible that spatial tempering stage beings that devoured it could progress straight to the body integration stage. Taking into account how rare true spirit beings were in the spirit realm, this type of true spirit essence was naturally also exceedingly scarce. Furthermore, some of this true spirit essence had been tracked down and used up by powerful beings from various races already. So this substance was even rarer than true spirit beings themselves in the spirit realm. According to the information in the Jade badge, true spirit essence originally existed in a gaseous form, but due to the fact that the substance contained a vast quantity of essential power, it was impossible for living beings to refine it in a short time following consumption. As such, after a certain period of time, the true spirit essence would form crystalline particles within the body of the living being that had consumed it. These particles contain true spirit-level essential power, and depending on the constitutions of their consumers, it would take several decades to several centuries before it could be truly refined. Han Li was quite ecstatic after reading through this part, but the rest of the information in the Jade badge was like a bucket of cold water to the head. It was said that after transforming into crystalline particles, the true spirit essence would have been completely assimilated by the consumer already, so there was no way for anyone else to absorb and refine it. If someone other than the original consumer were to try and forcibly absorb the essential power within these particles, the particles would simply disintegrate and return to heaven and earth. There was even an additional note which stated that this type of assimilation was extremely complete, meaning that there was no way to reverse it, and a warning had been enclosed to those who had obtained this essential power to keep that in mind. Han Li was naturally completely distraught upon seeing this. He stared blankly at the particle that had drifted out of the small vial, and a complex look appeared in his eyes. After a long while, Han Li finally came to a decision. The information in this Jade badge may not necessarily be accurate. I have to give this a try for myself no matter what. Thus, he made a hand seal with one hand while pointing a finger at the translucent particle, and an azure thread shot forth before encompassing the particle in a flash. Han Li then cast several incantation seals into the azure thread, and the particle within it began to change into different colors. In the beginning, it was completely transparent, but it then took on a faint red hue before darkening to an inky black color. In the end, it turned into a shimmering golden color after a flash of spiritual light. Han Li's eyes narrowed upon seeing this, and he immediately switched to another hand seal. Many runes then emerged in the air surrounding the golden particle, and they instantly formed a miniature formation with the particle at its very center. After that, Han Li opened his mouth to blast forth a stream of azure nascent flames, which disappeared into the miniature formation in a flash. A dull thump rang out as all of the runes in the formation began to glow with dazzling light, and the azure nascent flames easily combined as one with the formation. In the next instant, wisps of azure flames appeared all over the formation, enveloping the golden particle and commencing the refinement process. Initially, the particle remained completely motionless, but as time gradually passed, the golden light on its surface began to waver, and it became brighter and brighter as a low, buzzing sound rang out. Han Li's heart sank upon seeing this, and before he had a chance to switch to another hand seal, a dull thump erupted from within the formation. The golden particle abruptly disappeared, and an egg-sized cloud of golden mist appeared in its place. The mist swirled around as an astonishing boom akin to a thunderclap rang out from within, following which it swelled drastically to around 10 feet in size, and it was only continuing to expand. The azure flames around it were instantly torn apart, and the golden mist was flashing erratically, clearly having completely lost control and was about to explode at any moment. Han Li's expression changed drastically as he thought of the fearsome power imbued within the particle, and one of his hands suddenly turned inky black as he made a grabbing motion toward the particle. Gray light erupted from his fingertips, forming a gray light barrier that enshrouded the golden mist within it in a flash. Immediately thereafter, a dull rumbling sound rang out as golden and gray light intertwined with one another. The divine essence-effused light then began to flash erratically as if it were about to be blown apart any moment, and it was completely unable to repress the power of the golden mist. A fearful expression flashed through Han Li's eyes as his body hurtled backward in retreat toward a corner of the secret chamber. At the same time, he swept a sleeve through the air, and a small crystalline shield appeared up ahead. The shield swelled to several tens of feet in size in a flash, and almost as soon as Han Li had adopted all of these measures, the divine essence-effused light finally exploded as countless beams of golden light erupted forth from within. Han Li's heart immediately sank upon seeing this, and he instantly poured forth as much magic power as he could into the giant shield before him. At the same time, golden light flashed from his body, and golden scales appeared all over his skin. He had no choice but to withstand the force of this explosion, and as for whether his secret chamber or even his entire cave abode could remain intact in the aftermath, that was something that was known only to the heavens. However, an unexpected scene then ensued. After breaking through the gray light barrier, the golden mist didn't continue to swell or explode. Instead, it abruptly surged upward as a pillar of golden light, piercing through the restriction and the ceiling like a hot knife through butter. A passageway with a radius of around half a foot was punctured into the ceiling in the blink of an eye, and the golden pillar of light disappeared in a flash. Han Li looked up with an astonished expression on his face to find that there was sunlight shining into the secret chamber from the hole in the ceiling. Immediately thereafter, an earth-shattering explosion rang out in the air above, and all of the world's origin chi around the entire mountain began to surge and churn violently. Han Li's lips twitched as he raised a hand to cast a white incantation seal into the hole on the ceiling, and the hole began to seal over at a rapid rate amid flashes of white light, completely recovering in the blink of an eye. After that, Han Li flew out of the secret chamber as a streak of azure light, and he appeared in the air above his cave abode after just a few flashes. He raised his head to look up into the sky, and his brows furrowed slightly at the sight that he was greeted by. In the air above, bursts of fierce golden winds were howling through the sky. Below these gusts of golden winds, countless specks of five-colored light had appeared, and they were converging from all directions, creating quite an extraordinary spectacle to behold. Han Li's facial muscle convulsed spasmodically upon seeing this. Thank heavens he hadn't swallowed the particle to refine it in his stomach. Otherwise, he would have most likely been blown up into smithereens already. Of course, such a massive commotion naturally alerted the other cultivators residing on the Spirit Mountain as well. Thus, spiritual light flashed all over the mountain, and many beings emerged one after another. Some banded together with their acquaintances, and all of them were pointing up at the phenomenon taking place up above while conversing spiritedly with one another. Han Li's brows furrowed, as he also appraised the gusts of fierce golden winds from down below, scrambling to think of a good excuse to explain the situation if someone were to arrive and investigate the situation. Right at this moment, a burst of hearty laughter suddenly rang out from a certain part of the Spirit Mountain. Haha, who's experimenting with a new secret technique here? To think they'd gathered so much of the world's origin chi, and of such a high purity as well. I'm refining a treasure that requires a vast amount of the world's origin chi as a catalyst, so this will save me a lot of trouble. As soon as the voice trailed off, a streak of crimson light shot forth from down below before plunging headfirst into the golden winds up above. All of a sudden, scorching flames erupted for around 10 feet out of the streak of crimson light, forming a crimson fireworm that was over 100 feet in length. The fiery worm expelled a vast expanse of shimmering red light out of its mouth with a loud rumbling boom, and the astonishing golden winds in the sky were all completely swept away by this red light in just the span of a few breaths. At this point, the crimson worm had already swelled to over 200 feet in length, and a burst of raucous laughter ran out as it transformed into a humanoid figure that was around 10 feet tall amid a flash of red light. The humanoid figure appeared to be an elderly man in his 60s with a set of rough facial features and a head of white hair. The man wore a set of purple robes and was appraising an item in his hand with a delighted look on his face. This was a crimson gourd that was around half a foot tall, and there were two shimmering red images engraved on its surface, one of which was a ball of flames, while other was a ferocious-looking worm. The image of the worm was completely identical to the fiery worm that had just appeared. What, it's eccentric Sue. When did that old monster come back? He seems to be even more powerful than he was before. A stir ran through many of the foreign beings down below at the sight of the purple-robed man, and many of them seemed to recognize him. And Lee faltered slightly upon seeing this before sweeping his spiritual sense toward the elderly man to find that this was a late-spatial tempering stage being. On a spirit mountain where no body integration stage beings resided, a being of his cultivation base was indeed quite formidable. However, a cultivation base of this caliber wasn't enough to draw such wary reactions from all of the spatial tempering stage beings present, so Han Li was feeling a little perplexed. However, seeing as the phenomenon created by this essential particle had been cleared away without attracting too much attention, Han Li naturally heaved a sigh of relief. Thus, he returned to his cave abode as a streak of azure light. Upon his return, he repaired the damaged restriction in his secret chamber, then sat down in a cross-legged manner again. He raised a hand, and a swath of black light surged forth from within his sleeve as the weeping soul beast appeared before him again. And Lee stared blankly at the beast for a long while before finally heaving a faint sigh. Following that experiment he just conducted, he no longer had any doubts about the information in the Jade badge, so he could only allow the weeping soul beast to slowly absorb the true Kirin essence. The weeping soul beast was his spirit beast, so if it could experience a drastic enhancement in power after absorbing the true Kirin essence, then that was naturally worthy of celebration as well. At the very least, it was much better than having the true Kirin essence appear several hundred years from now, then fall into someone else's hands. With that in mind, Han Li's mental state gradually reverted back to tranquility after the emotional roller coaster of elation, followed by dejection that he'd just gone through. Thus, he stowed the weeping soul beast away into his spirit beast bracelet, then flipped a hand over to produce an ordinary-looking azure jade vial. The vial seemed to be quite mundane and nondescript, but it was shimmering with faint azure light, and there were several restriction talismans plastered over its opening. And Lee tossed the vial into the air before rustling a sleeve, and a dozen or so formation flags flew up into the air from within. He then began to chant something before pointing a finger at the formation flags, and they all vanished into thin air as a dozen or so streaks of lights of different colors. A faint yellow light barrier appeared within the secret chamber, and there were runes of different sizes hovering all over its surface. Han Li had set up a small formation that had also encapsulated himself within it. After doing all that, he blew gently toward the azure jade vial, and a gentle breeze swept forth. The restriction talismans plastered over the opening of the vial were all removed by the gentle breeze, and a burst of faint spiritual light could be seen shimmering inside the vial. Han Li raised a hand and made a grabbing motion toward the jade vial, tipping it upside down to release a strange, colorful object. This was a humanoid object that was around several inches in size, but it was completely motionless, as if it were a miniature, colorful humanoid puppet. Even though the puppet-like object wasn't moving at all, Han Li still didn't dare to get complacent. He began to chant something before casting several incantation seals toward it in quick succession. Spiritual lights of different colors flashed from all over the humanoid puppet's body, following which it swelled drastically in size, reverting back to its original form in just a few flashes. This was a humanoid creature that was around 20 feet tall with a vibrant green face, but limbs that consisted of 4 purple roots. It was none other than the immortal Xianxia that Han Li had unintentionally run into in the Golden Devil mountain ranges. At this moment, there were runes of different colors all over its body, and it had been completely restricted. Its eyes were tightly shut, and it seemed to have entered a deep slumber. Han Li's eyes narrowed slightly as he appraised this immortal Xianxia with an intrigued look on his face. It was no wonder that he was displaying such a reaction. Han Li had witnessed spirit medicines that had taken on sentient forms in the past, and his own ninecurl spirit ginseng had even manifested an extremely lifelike white rabbit. However, this immortal Xianxia had manifested its entire body into an alternative form, and it was a humanoid form. This was not something that a spirit medicine of the ninecurl spirit ginseng's caliber could compare with. Even so, he didn't immediately awaken this immortal Xianxia. Instead, he flicked a finger, and a thin streak of sword chi shot forth from within his sleeve before circling around one of the immortal Xianxia's purple, root-like limbs. Azure light flashed, and a small gash was immediately inflicted onto the limb. A few drops of white liquid dripped out of the small gash, and a rich medicinal aroma wafted throughout the entire chamber. Han Li's eyes lit up as he raised his other hand to hurl forth a thumb-sized vial that he'd already prepared in advance. At the same time, he opened his mouth to expel a burst of azure light, and the azure light swept up the drops of white liquid dripping down from the immortal Xianxia's limb, then carried the liquid into the small vial without wasting even a single drop. At this moment, faint purple light flashed from the immortal Xianxia's limb, and the gash instantly healed as if it had never existed at all. However, Han Li seemed to have anticipated that this would happen, and he wasn't surprised to see this. After that, he raised a hand, and a burst of invisible power drew the small vial containing the white liquid into his grasp, and he held the vial under his nose before taking a whiff. What pure spiritual power, Han Li murmured to himself, and despite what he was saying, he didn't actually seem to be overly surprised. Meanwhile, he made a grabbing motion with his other hand, and a ball of silver light surfaced over his other palm, and the ball of light transformed into a round bowl that was around half a foot in size in a flash. The surface of the object was shimmering with silver light, and there were extremely beautiful and intricate patterns engraved onto it, thereby indicating that it was no ordinary bowl. Han Li tipped the small vial into the bowl without any hesitation, and a drop of white spirit liquid dripped out from within. After that, Han Li swept a sleeve toward the ground, and his storage bracelet flew out from within before expelling a swath of light. As the light swept along the ground, a series of boxes, vials, and other containers of different shapes and sizes appeared. Han Li swept his gaze through the line of containers before making a grabbing motion toward one of the jade boxes. The lid of the box flew off of its own accord, following which a thin stream of blue spirit liquid flew out from within before landing in the silver bowl. In the next instant, another vial rose into the air and also flew directly toward the silver bowl. Almost 8 hours later, the entire secret chamber was filled with a rich medicinal aroma, and Han Li had blue light flashing through his eyes as he inspected the silver bowl in his hand in a completely motionless manner, as if he were completely absorbed by its contents. After a long while, a wry chuckle sounded inside the secret chamber, and silver light flashed from Han Li's hand as the bowl abruptly disappeared. Looks like this immortal Xianxia's spirit blood can serve as quite an extraordinary pill refinement ingredient, but that alone definitely doesn't make it worthy of so much interest to a body integration stage being, so it looks like it must have some kind of alternative use, Han Li murmured to himself with a contemplative look on his face. As soon as his voice fell, he turned his attention to the immobilized immortal Xianxia again. He stroked his chin for a moment before suddenly flicking his 10 fingers in quick succession, and several tens of silver threads shot forth before disappearing into the immortal Xianxia's body in a flash. After that, Han Li withdrew his hands into his sleeves again and silently appraised the immortal Xianxia. Moments later, a faint layer of purple light suddenly surfaced over the immortal Xianxia's body, and its eyelids fluttered before it slowly opened its eyes, upon which it immediately met Han Li's gaze. Its eyes were of a faint green color. There was a piercing silver light shimmering with its pupils that created quite a peculiar sight to behold. Looks like I was still captured after all. Can you tell me where this is? Much to Han Li's surprise, the immortal Xianxia wasn't shocked or enraged in the slightest. Instead, it was speaking in a calm and collected manner, as if it were conversing with a normal stranger rather than its captor. A hint of a smile appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this, and he truthfully replied, "This is Cloud City, which is not far away from the Golden Devil mountain ranges. Looks like you must have attained intelligence long ago for you to still be so calm in this situation." The immortal Xianxia was silent for a moment before replying, "What can I do aside from remain calm in this situation? If I beg for my life, would you release me?" "That's true. A spirit medicine like you that is able to manifest a human form is extremely rare, even in the context of the entire spirit realm, so of course I won't be releasing you," Han Li replied with a smile and a nod. A hint of surprise flashed through the immortal Xianxia's eyes at the sight of Han Li's calm demeanor, but it then glanced at the limb that Han Li had inflicted a gash on earlier, and it harumphed coldly before closing its eyes, seemingly not wanting to communicate with Han Li any further. However, Han Li remained unfazed as he continued, "I'm quite curious. Aside from using you as an ingredient to refine pills, what other purposes can you serve? There must be something else. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many high-grade beings that are so desperate to capture you. A hint of a derisive sneer appeared on the immortal Zoisia's face upon hearing this, but its mouth remained firmly shut. Seeing as you've attained sentience and intelligence, you must have a soul already. You wouldn't want me to use a soul search technique, would you? Han Li sighed. A soul search technique. If you think you can get the information you want by using such a technique, then be my guest. The immortal Zoisia chuckled coldly. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. In the spirit realm, there weren't many soul-locking secret techniques like the one enclosed within the Provenance True Devil Arts, but there certainly wasn't a shortage of such secret techniques, either. This immortal Zoisia clearly lived for countless years, so it wasn't all that surprising that it had mastered such a technique. Even as these thoughts ran through his mind, his expression remained completely unchanged, so it was impossible to tell what he was thinking. It's all right if you don't tell me. After all, I can refine some top-grade pills using your body as an ingredient anyway. However, from what I've heard, the souls of spirit beings like you are very useful to some cultivators who are using certain special cultivation arts and secret techniques. I don't know how many years it took you to develop such a high level of intelligence, but if I were to hand you over to one of those aforementioned cultivators, all of your efforts would go to waste, Han Li suddenly mused. You're threatening me. The immortal Zoisia shuddered slightly before opening its eyes with a cold expression on its face. I wouldn't call that a threat. It's just that I took a great risk venturing into the Golden Devil mountain ranges, and I certainly don't want the risk I've taken to be all for nothing. Han Li chuckled in a completely emotionless manner. A cold silver light flashed through the immortal Zoisia's eyes, and it asked, "If I tell you, will you release my soul? How are you going to make me believe you?" Releasing your soul is naturally out of the question. It would be troublesome for me if you were to possess someone and seek revenge on me, or be captured by someone else and reveal to them information about me. However, I can give you a final release so you can be reincarnated again someday. As for whether you believe me or not, do you have any other choice? Han Li said with a smile. I do indeed have no choice, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to raise any conditions. The immortal Zoisia replied in a slow voice. What conditions do you have? I'd be happy to hear them, Han Li said with a nonchalant smile. The immortal Zoisia seemed to have considered this matter in advance, and it immediately replied, It's very simple. I'll tell the true purpose that my body can serve, and in return, you have to allow my soul to dissipate into heaven and earth so I can enter the cycle of reincarnation. In that case, if I do have a second life, I'll have a chance to become a being like you. However, this exchange must take place on my terms. Otherwise, I'd rather have both my body and soul perish here than be used by someone else. What terms do you propose? Han Li asked. I'll use a secret technique to split my soul into two, the larger portion of which will contain my autonomous will, while the remaining portion will contain some of my memories. You have to release the main portion of my soul first, and if the remaining portion sees that you've done so, it'll tell you my secret. After you get what you want, you have to release the remaining portion of my soul as well, so it can also enter the cycle of reincarnation. Thus, you won't have anything to worry about, and I can also tell you my secret without any qualms, the immortal Zoisia said in an expressionless manner. Han Li was quite tempted by this offer, but he still shook his head as he said, I won't have anything to worry about. I'm not sure that's true. What if I were to release the main portion of your soul, only for the remaining portion to revoke your promise and refrain from telling me anything? In that case, I'd be releasing your soul for nothing. Back when you captured me, I was already carrying many injuries, so even if I hadn't fallen into your hands, someone else would have captured me sooner or later. Hence, I have no vendetta against you, so I certainly wouldn't risk a portion of my soul just to spite you. After all, who knows what issues could arise if a damaged soul were to enter the cycle of reincarnation? The immortal Zoisia countered in a calm manner. Han Li stroked his chin and appraised the immortal Zoisia for a while before suddenly nodding with a smile as he said, All right, we'll do as you say. You're really willing to accept these terms so easily. The immortal Zoisia was rather taken back by how readily willing Han Li was to accept these conditions. Do you have a better suggestion then? Han Li asked with a faint smile on his face. No, it's just that I thought even if you were going to agree, you'd have to think about it for quite a while, the immortal Zoisia explained. There's nothing much for me to think about. In all honesty, being able to capture you was a pleasant surprise in itself, so there's no need for me to be greedy and overthink things, Han Li said in a meaningful manner. The immortal Zoisia's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, but it didn't say anything in response. All right, you can go ahead and unleash your soul-splitting secret technique now. How much time will you require? You're not going to tell me you need several decades or even a century, are you? Han Li asked. Of course it won't take that long, but it's not going to be a short time either. I should be able to complete this secret technique within a year. However, during this time, you have to remove some of the restrictions on my body, the immortal Xianxia replied in a serious manner. A year, eh? All right, I can give you that much time and I'll remove most of the restrictions on your body. However, the restrictions that remain on your body will be quite nasty, so I'd advise you not to think about running away. Of course, if you can still get away under these circumstances, then I'd have no one but myself to blame, Han Li said in a calm manner. Prior to being captured by you, my past injuries were already flaring up, and I'm only just barely holding myself together now. Where will I get the extra energy to try and escape? The immortal Xianxia lamented with a wry smile. Han Li chuckled upon hearing this and didn't offer a reply. He then suddenly flicked a finger, and two spirit flowers, one golden and one silver, flew out of his sleeve. The immortal Xianxia immediately focused his gaze on these two spirit flowers to find that one was a golden beetle, while the other was a miniature silver fire raven. Each of them was around the size of a human thumb, and they resembled intricate ornaments that had been forged from actual silver and gold. The silver fire raven didn't evoke much of a reaction from the immortal Xianxia, but as soon as it caught sight of the golden beetle, its expression changed drastically as it exclaimed, "Gold-devouring beetle. Oh, you recognize this spirit insect. Hee, in that case, I'm sure you won't try to escape now." Han Li chuckled as he raised a hand and pointed a finger at the golden beetle and the silver bird. The two creatures immediately hovered over to the immortal Xianxia at his behest. The immortal Xianxia's expression changed several times in quick succession upon seeing this. It was naturally aware of just how fearsome gold-devouring beetles, and this was a mature beetle as well. If it weren't for the fact that its body had been completely restricted, it would have most likely fled for its life already. Han Li hadn't explained what the fiery silver bird was, but for it to have been released alongside the gold-devouring beetles suggested that it was clearly quite a terrifying creature as well. The two creatures drifted over to the immortal Xianxia's mouth, and it hesitated momentarily before gritting its teeth, then opening its mouth, upon which both of the creatures disappeared into its body at once. Han Li smiled upon seeing this before making a grabbing motion toward the immortal Xianxia. Several tens of silver threads instantly flew out of its body before disappearing up his sleeve in a flash. Immediately thereafter, Han Li began to chant something, and a swath of colorful light also emerged from the immortal Xianxia's body, then formed a series of 5-colored talismans that disappeared into thin air. Silver light flashed through the immortal Xianxia's eyes upon seeing this, and brilliant purple light suddenly began emanating from its body. Meanwhile, the green light radiating from its face dimmed significantly, and its 4 root-like limbs transformed into normal human limbs amid a flash of purple light. Tusk, as expected of a spirit being of your caliber, even after sustaining such severe injuries, you were still able to recover to such an extent on your own. Han Li clicked his tongue in wonder. You have a medicine garden in here, right? Let me take root in your medicine garden. In doing so, I'll be able to draw upon the spiritual qi released by the spirit medicines nearby to accelerate the completion of my soul-splitting secret technique, the immortal Xianxia asked. Of course I do. Come with me, Han Li replied with a nod. This was what he was going to propose anyway, as getting the immortal Xianxia to stay in the medicine garden would mean that Dahl would be able to constantly keep an eye on it. In any case, this immortal Xianxia didn't possess a powerful cultivation base. On top of that, it was severely injured, and the cave abode had powerful restrictions set on it, so Dahl's early spatial tempering stage power should be more than enough to keep it in check. Letter 1D667, letter 1D65A, letter 1D65A, letter 1D500, letter 1D486, letter 1D4EB. Letter 1D484, letter 1D664, letter 1D4F6. With that in mind, Han Li rose to his feet before sweeping an arm through the air. A burst of azure light flashed past, clearing away all of the containers on the ground. At the same time, a burst of white light flashed from the surface of the stone door, and it swung open on its own. Han Li immediately made his way out of the secret chamber, and after a brief hesitation, the immortal Xianxia followed. As soon as he emerged from the secret chamber, he was met by a completely expressionless woman standing outside with faint glacial qi emanating from her body. This was none other than the sentient puppet doll that Han Li had summoned using his spiritual sense. Doll extended a respectful bow toward Han Li before standing up straight in a wooden manner again. Han Li nodded and didn't say anything as he made his way toward the medicine garden. Seeing as how rare cave abodes were in Cloud City, Han Li Medicine Garden naturally wasn't very large. It was only around 2,000 to 3,000 feet in size. However, as the immortal Xianxia followed him into the medicine garden, a pleased look appeared on its face as it remarked, "Not bad. The place isn't very big, but the spiritual qi here is very rich. You've picked a good place, fellow Taoist." It's not that I've picked a good place. The abundance of spiritual qi is pretty much the same all over this entire spirit mountain. You can find any place you like to take root in, Han Li replied with a nonchalant chuckle. Is that so? Then don't mind if I do. The immortal Xianxia nodded before its body swayed, and it entered the medicine garden ahead of Han Li. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face as he also entered the garden in an unhurried manner, followed closely by Doll. As the immortal Xianxia walked through the medicine garden, it scanned its gaze through the surrounding area, and a hint of surprise appeared on its face. Setting aside how precious the spirit medicines in this garden were, close to half of them were over 10,000 years old, and among the remaining spirit medicines, many of them were still over 1,000 years old or even several thousand years old. The entire medicine garden was filled with all types of rich medicinal aromas, and if a mortal were to stay in here for even a short while, it was quite possible that all of their existing ailments would be completely alleviated. The immortal Xianxia was quite stunned by this, and it was immediately tempted to examine the entire medicine garden. As such, even after crossing through the center of the garden, it still continued onward. And Li merely followed along behind it in an expressionless manner. As aforementioned, the medicine garden wasn't very large, and moments later, the immortal Xianxia was close to reaching its conclusion. Right at this moment, a white shadow flashed, and a creature that was around half a foot in size suddenly jumped out of a patch of spirit medicines nearby. It then began to skip toward another direction, and the immortal Xianxia was quite intrigued to find that this was a large, snowy white rabbit. It was none other than the rabbit manifested by the soul of Han Li's ninecryle spirit ginseng. All of a sudden, the immortal Xianxia seemed to have realized what this rabbit was, and an expression of shock and elation appeared on its face as it exclaimed, "What's this? Why do you seem so surprised, fellow Taoist? Have you not seen other spirit medicines like you that have manifested sentient forms?" Han Li was rather taken aback by its vehement reaction. "Of course not. Spirit medicines like me have so many natural predators, and we're almost completely defenseless against them. Even among tens of thousands of spirit medicines, it's hard to say if even one will reach the stage where it attains sentience," the immortal Xianxia hurriedly replied before rushing off in pursuit of the white rabbit. After walking for just over 100 feet, the immortal Xianxia arrived at a secluded place within the medicine garden, and it was also the spot where the ninecryle spirit ginseng was situated. The white rabbit that was manifested from its soul was currently sitting at the foot of the plant, nibbling on a large root that it had dug out somewhere from the medicine garden. At the sight of Han Li and the others, the rabbit merely cast an errant glance toward them with its ruby-like eyes, then continued to nibble on its food as if there were no one around. Thinking back to how terrified of him it had once been, Han Li couldn't help but chuckle at the contrast in its past and current demeanors. Meanwhile, the immortal Xianxia was appraising the white rabbit with a gentle look in its eyes. It suddenly stepped forward and made a grabbing motion, upon which a swath of purple light surged forth from its hand, sweeping up both the rabbit and the root that it was eating and drawing them toward it. The white rabbit continued to nibble on its root within the purple light, as if hadn't noticed that anything was amiss. The immortal Xianxia stared at the white rabbit for a while, before extending a hand into the purple light to try and stroke it. However, before its fingers could make contact with the rabbit's furry body, the latter vanished through the air amid a flash of spiritual light, leaving a trail of afterimages in its wake. In the next instant, the white rabbit appeared on the ground again, and it had risen up on its hind legs. At the same time, its snowy white fur also stood up on end, and it barely its little teeth at the immortal Xianxia in what it presumably thought to be a menacing display. It was quite clear that the immortal Xianxia's actions had rubbed the rabbit the wrong way. However, the immortal Xianxia merely smiled in response, and its aura suddenly changed as the light emanating from its body changed from purple to a vibrant green color. A burst of rich wood attribute spiritual qi radiated from its body, and after coming into contact with this spiritual qi, the white rabbit suddenly faltered in its menacing display. After taking a whiff of the air around it with its little pink nose, its expression eased significantly, and there even seemed to be a hint of affection in its eyes as it cast its gaze toward the immortal Xianxia again. "Come here, little guy." The immortal Xianxia clapped its hands together before opening its arms in an inviting manner. The white rabbit seemed to be able to comprehend what the immortal Xianxia was saying, and after a brief hesitation, it really did jump into the immortal Xianxia's arms. The immortal Xianxia was elated and began carefully stroking the white rabbit's head. The white rabbit's eyes narrowed with enjoyment in response, and it stuck out its little red tongue to lick the immortal Xianxia's fingers. As the immortal Xianxia stroked the rabbit's head, it turned to Han Li with a serious look on its face and said, "This is splendid. Looks like it's not far away from attaining intelligence. Fellow Taoist Han, seeing as this brethren of mine is able to move around so freely in your medicine garden, it's quite apparent to me that you're taking great care of it. In that case, you wouldn't mind if I assisted it in attaining intelligence and taught it some things, would you?" "You can help it attain intelligence." Han Li was rather surprised to hear this. "Indeed, I'm a spirit medicine that has attained intelligence, and there are some abilities and cultivation arts that I've mastered that can only be inherited by my brethren. If it could learn everything that I want to teach it, it'll be able to avoid making a lot of the mistakes I made in the past. If it can also manifest a human form like me, I'm sure it'll be of great assistance to you in the future," the immortal Xianxia replied in a slow voice. After looking at the immortal Xianxia for a long while, Han Li finally nodded, but he also stated some conditions of his own. "I can allow you to do that, but my puppet has to be present to supervise whatever you do to it. On top of that, this puppet will be accompanying you closely at all times." "No problem at all. There's nothing secretive or malicious about what I want to do," the immortal Xianxia immediately agreed. "All right, then I have no further issues either. You can rest here for the next year or so, and if you have any requests, just notify my puppet," Han Li said as he waved a hand through the air, and Dal immediately stepped forward to join him. "From this day forth, stay with this fellow Taoist at all times, and don't leave him unattended for even a single moment," Han Li ordered in a serious manner. The sentient puppet didn't possess a very high level of spiritual nature, but it was naturally able to understand such simple instructions. As such, Dal nodded in an expressionless manner to acknowledge Han Li's commands. The immortal Xianxia chuckled upon seeing this, and it flicked a wrist to send forth a streak of purple light that carried the white rabbit gently back onto the ground. After that, it made its way over to a spot that was several tens of feet away from the ninecurl spirit ginseng, then spread its feet apart. Green light flashed all over its body again, and its four limbs reverted back into their purple root form before burrowing straight into the ground. At this moment, the immortal Xianxia's entire body took a translucent green hue. Han Li stood on the spot and appraised the immortal Xianxia for a while, before departing from the medicine garden with a faint smile on his face. Even though he was very curious about the mysterious uses of the immortal Xianxia, there was something else that he had to attend to for now. The date that Xianxia had agreed to repair his suit of heavenly devilish armor was about to arrive. Han Li was also very much looking forward to this. As a safety precaution, Han Li released his leopard Kirin beast and second nascent soul, then activated all of the restrictions in his cave abode before departing. Several hours later, the beast-drawn carriage that he had hailed arrived before Xianxia's shop. The doors of the shop were tightly shut, and it seemed to not be accepting any customers. Han Li raised a hand upon seeing this, and a burst of fiery light suddenly flew out of his sleeve before disappearing through the doors in a flash. After that, he continued to wait patiently outside. Moments later, the doors opened amid a gentle creak, and Xianxia's soft voice sounded from inside. "You sure are punctual, Brother Han. Half a month has only just passed, and you've already come to visit me." I'm quite eager to get his armor repaired. My apologies if I come across as a little impatient," Han Li chuckled as he strode into the shop. The doors closed behind him on their own, and Xianxia stood at the center of the shop as she turned to Han Li with a smile on her face. As soon as Han Li made his way over to her, Xianxia made a hand seal to activate her formation plate. Spiritual light flashed, and both of them abruptly disappeared from the shop, having been teleported directly into Xianxia's spatial rift. Han Li made his way out of the teleportation formation before looking around, and his gaze immediately settled on a certain corner of the space. There, a large formation with a radius of over 100 feet had been set up. The entire formation was inky black, and there were a dozen or so black crystals embedded into the ground all around it. At the very center of the formation was an azure copper cauldron that was around 5 feet tall, and there were complex runes carved all over its surface, as well as faint white mist emanating from it. Several feet in the air above the cauldron was a fist-sized object that was enshrouded in white mist. The object was hovering in a completely stationary manner and radiating dazzling black light. Han Li's eyes narrowed upon seeing this. The object above the cauldron had changed slightly in appearance, but there was no mistaking the frosty devilish chi emanating from it. It was none other than the holy gray devilish core of that devilish ape. At this point, the devilish core had completely crystallized, giving it the appearance of a shimmering black crystal. Xianxia also made her way out of the teleportation formation, and smiled as she said, "What do you think, fellow Taoist? I certainly haven't been slacking off these past few days. I had to expend a lot of effort and precious materials to completely wipe away all traces of the holy gray devilish ape's soul from this devilish core, and also make the devilish chi it contained less volatile and difficult to control." "Oh, from the sounds of it, you're preparing to completely refine this devilish core rather than embed it into the suit of armor," Han Li mused as he stroked his chin. "I didn't think you'd be so knowledgeable in tool refinement as well, Brother Han. Indeed, that is my intention. Embedding the entire devilish core into the suit of armor will repair the largest few cracks on it, but I won't be able to address the smaller and finer cracks then. I'm sure you wouldn't want to wear a suit of armor with glaring chinks in it, right, Brother Han?" Xianxia explained with a rather surprised look on her face. "I only know a little about tool refinement, so I'll leave everything to you, fellow Taoist. I'm very confident in the tool refinement techniques of the crystal race," Han Li said with a smile. Xianxia merely smiled upon hearing Han Li's modest response, and she continued, "While I'm repairing this suit of armor, I'll have to activate the restriction in this space, and I may also need you to lend me a hand. If everything goes smoothly, we should be able to complete the repairing process in about 3 days. 3 days is certainly not a long time, and this treasure is being repaired for me, so it's only right that I lend you my assistance." Han Li had no objections whatsoever. "In that case, let's begin right away." Xianxia didn't seem to want to keep wasting time with words either, as she raised a hand into the air. The formation plate that she was carrying rose up into the air, then rotated on the spot above her head. Spiritual light flashed as incantation seals of different colors swept forth from the formation plate, then disappeared into various locations in the spatial rift. In the next instant, fierce winds suddenly swept through the air up above, and oppressive dark clouds surged forth in a frenzy. At the same time, a dull ringing sound rang out from the walls of the space before layers of gray chi began to surface. Thus, the entire space was immersed in complete darkness, so potent that one couldn't see their fingers even if they were to hold them up to their face. It was as if this space had been plunged into a devilish realm. Han Li swept a sleeve through the air upon seeing this, and an egg-sized ball of white light flew out his sleeve before revolving around him, thereby making the surrounding area a lot brighter. At this moment, Xianxia was already making her way toward the large formation. Han Li didn't say anything upon seeing this, but his body swayed as he took what appeared to be 2 slow and measured steps. However, he then suddenly appeared behind Xianxia in the next instant, as if by instantaneous teleportation. Xianxia seemed to be completely oblivious to what was happening behind her, and she merely raised a hand to cast an incantation seal toward the formation up ahead. A low buzzing sound instantly rang out, following which the entire formation activated amid a swirl of black light. Han Li's expression changed slightly at the sight of the scenes unfolding before his eyes. He had yet to decipher the purpose of this formation, but the bursts of devilish chi emanating from the formation were very pure indeed. Thus, he was left feeling rather curious about where Xianxia had sourced so much devilish chi from. Letter 1D4 1F, letter 1D563, letter 1D556, letter 1D4 1E, letter 1D430, letter 1D556, letter 1D5F0, letter 1D428, letter 1D426. Right at this moment, Xianxia suddenly began to chant something, following which brilliant azure light erupted from her body. An azure Kirin projection that was several tens of feet in size then suddenly appeared behind her. Initially, the Kirin projection remained completely still, but as Xianxia's chanting gradually grew more urgent, The protection finally slowly opened its mouth to expel a head-sized ball of flames. The fireball was quite peculiar in that it was both black and azure in color, and it struck the copper cauldron at the center of the formation in a flash. A layer of scorching black and azure flames immediately surfaced all over the cauldron as a result. "Bring out your devilish armor, Brother Han," Xianxia said as she turned to Han Li with a solemn look on her face. Han Li naturally had no objections to this. As such, he flipped a hand over to produce a jade box that was around a foot in size, upon which were plastered a pair of restriction talismans. He swept a sleeve over the box to remove the talismans and its lid, and a burst of black chi immediately surged forth from within in a frenzy. Within the black chi, a suit of purple armor that was around half a foot slowly emerged. Not only was it extremely sinister in appearance, there were several spikes protruding from the shoulder and knee sections of the armor. On top of that, its entire surface was filled with black patterns, and it was emanating immensely powerful devilish chi. However, there was a large hole on the chest of the suit of armor, and the surrounding area was riddled with cracks, clearly indicating that it had been severely damaged. Xianxia's expression changed slightly at the sight of the black chi surging forth from the suit of armor, and she waved a hand through the air to conjure up a translucent light barrier before pointing a finger at the box from afar. The purple suit of armor drifted slowly toward the formation at her behest, seemingly having been summoned by some kind of invisible power. Before the suit of armor reached the center of the formation, Xianxia raised a hand to cast a silver incantation seal, which disappeared into the copper cauldron in a flash. A dull clang akin to the toll of a large bell instantly rang out from within the cauldron, and the black and azure flames burning around it instantly swelled to sweep up the suit of armor and draw it into the cauldron. Immediately thereafter, a string of rumbling booms akin to thunderclaps rang out from within the cauldron, following which the intricate black patterns on its surface began to flash and glow. At the same time, black chi began to surge throughout the entire formation down below, and faint silver runes emerged from various locations all over the formation. As soon as these runes appeared, they surged toward the cauldron in a frenzy before vanishing into it. After that, Xianxia began to chant something in a low voice again while making a hand seal. The ground near the formation began to tremor violently, and piercing yellow light suddenly flashed from its four corners, following which a yellow stone platform emerged from each corner. These platforms were around 10 feet tall each, but all of them were extremely smooth, and there was a small black flag standing on each of them. Round the flags were containers of all shapes and sizes, and Han Li's expression changed slightly upon seeing this before quickly reverting back to normal. As Xianxia continued to chant her incantations, the four flags swelled to 50 to 60 feet in size, and only then did Xianxia withdraw her hand seal as she turned to Han Li and said, "Let's begin, fellow Taoist Han. During this repair process, all you have to do is listen to my instructions and inject your magic power into those four devilish flags in a timely manner." "No problem," Han Li immediately replied with a quick nod. A pleased smile appeared on Xianxia's face upon hearing this, and she pointed a finger up at the formation plate hovering in midair again. A long cry immediately rang out within the formation plate, following which countless incantation seals surged forth, all of which disappeared into the dark clouds up above. The gray chi emanating from the walls also began to permeate through the air, and within mere moments, Han Li and Xianxia were both inundated by this gray chi. Time passed by slowly, and 3 days flew by in the blink of an eye. The doors of Xianxia's shop were abruptly flung open, and a humanoid figure strode out from within before hailing a beast-drawn carriage and departing in an unhurried manner. At this moment, within the spatial rift in the shop, Xianxia was standing at the edge of the formation, staring blankly at the copper cauldron up ahead. The surface of the cauldron was riddled with countless thin cracks, and the formation down below was also in a very sorry state, with a small section of it having been completely destroyed. The black crystals embedded into the ground around the formation had all been reduced to powder, and in the air above Xianxia, the Kirin projection had shrunk down to only around a foot in size. Both Xianxia and the Kirin wore contemplative looks on their faces, seemingly in deep thought about something. After a long while, the Kirin projection finally sighed. "That suit of devilish armor most likely has some history behind it. There's no way that something like that would have happened when repairing a suit of armor belonging to a normal heavenly devilish monarch." Indeed, after the suit of armor was repaired, it drew the spiritual sense from a devilish being of another realm, and that being almost manifested a devilish body using the devilish chi gathered here. Xianxia replied as a hint of lingering fear flashed through her eyes. It's a good thing that Han Brat possesses divine devil-bane lightning and was able to disperse the devilish chi that was gathering. Otherwise, we'd be in a lot of trouble, the Kirin projection mused in a grim manner. And as that devilish being was able to force its spiritual sense through to this realm from an alternate realm, it most likely possesses powers comparable to true spirit being. Could it be that there's more than meets the eyes with this suit of armor? But after repairing the suit of armor, and I didn't discover anything amiss with it, Xianxia said with furrowed brows. There wasn't enough time for me to identify anything, either. If we'd known this earlier, you should have never given this suit of armor away. After repairing it, you could have fabricated an excuse to keep it, then use some other treasures to reimburse him instead, the Azure Kirin projection suddenly said. I did indeed want to do that. However, even though he seemed quite calm when dispersing that devilish chi, I could sense that if I were to refuse to hand the suit of armor over to him, he would have most likely killed me on the spot without any hesitation. His powers are virtually comparable to that of holy race beings, and I've used up almost all of my life-saving treasures in the Golden Devil mountain ranges, so there's a very good chance that I would have died had he turned on me, Xianxia replied with a wry smile. It's a pity that I exhausted so much of my energy in the Golden Devil mountain ranges as well. Otherwise, if we were to draw on the power of the spatial restriction here, it's not impossible that the two of us would have been able to force him to leave the armor here, the Kirin projection also said in a rather gloomy manner. Xianxia's expression changed a few times before she finally took a deep breath and said, so be it. No matter how powerful that suit of armor is, the fact of the matter is that it's a devilish treasure, so there's no way I would have been able to use it anyway. As such, it wouldn't be worth offending such a powerful being to try and keep it. The Kirin projection was silent for a moment before heaving a resigned sigh. It's good that you can think that way. I guess we'll just have to concede here. As for whether the secrets behind that suit of armor will eventually be unveiled, that'll be up to his luck. It's just a pity that you'd missed out on the opportunity to make use of that suit of armor in the future. With you by my side, will I have a shortage of opportunities? Xianxia chuckled, seemingly having already come to terms with the current situation. That's true. What you're missing now aren't opportunities. Instead, you have to advance your cultivation base as quickly as possible. Otherwise, you won't be able to grasp any opportunities that you encounter anyway. By the way, did you find the thing that I asked you to search for? The Kirin projection suddenly changed the subject. Not yet. It said that only a few holy race old monsters know of its whereabouts, so it'll be quite hard to track down, Xianxia replied with a troubled look on her face. You'll have to find a way. Without that thing, you won't even be able to enter those ancient ruins, the Kirin projection urged. Xianxia was silent for a moment before replying, I'm well aware of that. I'll see if I can buy or borrow it from one of the juniors of those old monsters. Just as Xianxia and the Kirin projection were discussing their future plans, Han Li was on his way back to his cave abode. He was seated with a calm expression on his face in the beast-drawn carriage, but he was actually nowhere near as calm as he looked. Letter 1D6 letter 1D5 letter 1D5 letter 1D4 1 letter 1D4 30 letter 1D6 letter 1D4 1C letter 1D6 letter 1D5 Never would he have thought that repairing the suit of devilish armor would have led to such a perilous situation. All of a sudden, he reached a hand up into his other sleeve and grabbed onto a lukewarm object. This was a jade box that the newly repaired suit of heavenly devilish armor had been placed into, and he'd plastered over 10 restriction talismans all over the box. Han Li stored the jade box with his finger, and he couldn't help but recall back to the scenes that had unfolded in Xianxia's spatial rift. The first half of the armor's repair process had been quite smooth, but a series of issues began to arise during the second half of the process. These were issues such as the formation suddenly ceasing to function for no reason, and cracks appearing all over the cauldron, also due to no discernible reason. Thankfully, the two of them were able to resolve these issues. However, never would they have thought that just as the final repair procedure was about to be completed, an extremely powerful burst of spiritual sense suddenly forced its way into the spatial rift, then immediately surged toward the suit of devilish armor. Due to how abruptly everything had happened, Xianxia was momentarily rooted to the spot. Thankfully, this wasn't the first time that Han Li had witnessed inter-realm spiritual sense of this nature, and he immediately dispelled it using his divine devil-bane lightning. Generally speaking, even if a burst of interrealm spiritual sense were to fail to achieve its objective, it could still immediately tear through space and escape. However, perhaps the owner of the spiritual sense was intent on obtaining that suit of armor, or perhaps they didn't think two spatial tempering stage beings would have been enough to pose a threat to it. In any case, as opposed to retreating, the burst of spiritual sense plunged into the pure devilish chi within the formation, then tried to manifest a devilish body. Of course, Han Li wasn't going to allow it to get its way. Thus, he released all of the divine devil-bane lightning within his body at once, striking the devilish being with a devastating barrage. The devilish being was naturally unfathomably powerful, and even a wisp of its spiritual sense that hadn't manifested into a devilish body could withstand a dozen or so bolts of divine devil-bane lightning with ease. However, hundreds of arcs of golden lightning had been unleashed at once by Han Li, and the devilish being's spiritual sense didn't even get a chance to cry out before it was zapped into nothingness. Through that event, both Han Li and Xianxia were made aware of the fact that this suit of devilish armor seemed to be far more powerful than they'd originally expected. Han Li had obviously also identified the hesitation in Xianxia's eyes at the time, and even though his expression remained quite calm, he was ready to attack at a moment's notice if she tried to go back on her word. As a result, even though Xianxia was clearly extremely reluctant to part with the suit of devilish armor, she could only look on as Han Li stored it away into a jade box. Thus, Han Li's impression of her improved slightly once again, but he didn't stay there for much longer. After extending a few words of gratitude to Xianxia, he left her spatial rift before departing on a beast-drawn carriage. And thus, the story came full circle. He was currently sitting in the carriage while stroking the jade box up his sleeve, and he was becoming more and more curious toward this suit of devilish armor. Of course, now would not be a good time to bring out the suit of armor to study it, as he was sitting in a beast-drawn carriage. As such, Han Li could only repress his curiosity and stow the jade box away before entering a meditative state. Several hours later, the beast-drawn carriage arrived at the foot of the spirit mountain. Han Li disembarked before tossing a spirit stone to the driver, then flew up the mountain in a calm manner. His cave abode was situated around halfway up the mountain, and all of the cultivators that with cave abodes here were either almost constantly away or arduously cultivating in their cave abodes. As such, it was relatively rare to see anyone on this mountain. However, as Han Li was flying toward his cave abode, he was quite surprised to discover a pair of uninvited guests outside. One of them was a red-robed man who appeared to be in his 60s. This was none other than the eccentric Su who had used his crimson gourd to absorb all of the world's origin chi gathered in the aftermath of the true Kirin essence's explosion. The very same crimson gourd was hanging from his waist, and standing next to him was a young boy who appeared to be around 14 to 15 years old with a set of fine and delicate facial features. Both of them were sitting outside the stone door of his cave abode with their eyes closed in meditation, and Han Li was naturally quite surprised to see this. All of a sudden, eccentric Su opened his eyes as if he'd sensed Han Li's return, and he smiled as he asked, "You're the fellow Taoist Han who just moved in recently, right?" Han Li recomposed himself before asking in a polite manner, "That's right. Were you waiting for me, fellow Taoist Su?" All of the spatial tempering stage beings on the entire spirit mountain were clearly quite wary of this eccentric Su, so he had to be quite a powerful being. As such, Han Li naturally didn't want to get on his bad side. I am indeed here to pay you a visit, fellow Taoist Han. This here is one of my direct lineal descendants. Pay your respects to fellow Taoist Han." To Han Li's surprise, eccentric Su seemed to be quite eager to introduce this junior of his to him for some reason. "Junior Su Lungxiang pays his respects to Senior Han," the young boy immediately greeted in a respectful manner. There's no need for formalities. Han Li had already ascertained with his spiritual sense that this young boy's cultivation base was at the pinnacle of the foundation establishment stage, so he was only one step away from the core formation stage. For a cultivator of his age, that was a reflection of outstanding aptitude. "You don't find my visit too abrupt, do you, fellow Taoist Han?" eccentric Su chuckled. "Not at all. It's my honor to host you at my humble cave abode, fellow Taoist Su. If it weren't for the fact that I had some matters to attend to during these past few days, I would have welcomed you into my cave abode right away. Please come in, brother Su." Han Li was still rather perplexed by this situation, but his expression remained unchanged as he swept a sleeve toward the stone door of his cave abode. A burst of azure light swept forth, and the stone door opened on its own in a soundless manner to reveal a shimmering white passageway that was paved with beautiful white jade. Eccentric Su expressed his gratitude toward Han Li's hospitality before making his way into the passageway with the young boy right behind him. After entering his cave abode, Han Li immediately released his spiritual sense to contact the second nascent soul that he'd left here. Thus, he learned that nothing had happened during these past 3 days aside from Eccentric Su's visit, and he was quite relieved to hear this as he led Eccentric Su and his junior into the hall. After exchanging some pleasantries, Eccentric Su and Han Li each took a seat, but the young boy continued to stand behind Eccentric Su with his hands hanging by his sides. After sitting down in his chair, Eccentric Su said, "Truth be told, fellow Taoist Han, I've been in seclusion for a long time, and I've only recently re-emerged. Not long after that, I heard that a new fellow Taoist had moved into the Spirit Mountain, and I heard that Elder Kian Jizi of the myriad ancient race had organized your cave abode in person. May I ask if you're related in some way to Elder Kian Jizi?" I'm just an outsider. How could I be related to Senior Kian Jizi in any way? It's just that I saved the life of a fellow Taoist from the myriad ancient race a few years ago, and that fellow Taoist just so happened to be quite close with Senior Kian Jizi, Han Li replied in a calm manner. I see. That makes sense. After all, the myriad ancient race is ranked quite high among the 13 heavenly cloud races, and Senior Kian Jizi is an elder of the myriad ancient race, so he can certainly organize for you to settle in Cloud City without ant issues, Eccentric Su chuckled. Han Li merely smiled and offered no response. He knew that this Eccentric Su had to be visiting him for a reason, and he was most likely going to elaborate on the purpose of his visit next. As expected, Eccentric Su suddenly adopted a rather serious expression as he said, "Truth be told, I decided to visit you on this occasion because I have some questions I'd like to ask you. Please forgive me for my unannounced intrusion." Han Li immediately became slightly more guarded upon hearing this, but he still smiled and replied, "There's no need to be so polite, Brother Su. Cultivators like us are all straightforward beings, so feel free to tell me if you need something from me. If I know the answer to your question, I'll be sure to reveal them." "In that case, I won't waste any more time," Eccentric Su said with a smile. After a brief pause, a serious look appeared in his eyes again as he asked, "Were you responsible for the astonishing phenomenon that took place a few days ago on our mountain?" Eccentric Su fixed an intense, unblinking gaze on Han Li as he spoke. Han Li's heart stirred slightly upon hearing this, but his expression remained unchanged as he asked with a smile, "Why do you think that phenomenon had something to do with me?" "It's quite simple. The phenomenon spanned quite a massive area, but it wasn't all that difficult for me to identify the epicenter of the explosion. On top of that, I just so happened to be taking a stroll outside my cave abode as I was getting rather frustrated with some aspects of my cultivation, and coincidentally, I saw a beam of golden light flying out from somewhere near your cave abode right before the explosion took place," Eccentric Su revealed in a truthful manner. Han Li's brows furrowed reflexively upon hearing this, but he then quickly put on a smile as he said, "Seeing as you've already witnessed everything, then there's nothing for me to hide. I did indeed unintentionally create that phenomenon a few days ago. Come to think of it, I have to thank you for cleaning up all of the world's origin chi that gathered over the mountain as a result. Otherwise, I would have had to clear away everything myself." Eccentric Su was quite elated to hear this, and he hurriedly asked, "So you really were responsible for creating that phenomenon? That's fantastic. Would you be able to replicate the same phenomenon again, Brother Han?" "Replicate that phenomenon? Why would you want me to do that? Would you be able to enlighten me, fellow Taoist Su?" Han Li asked with a perplexed look on his face. Eccentric Su initially faltered slightly upon hearing this before suddenly bursting into laughter as he said, "Of course. Fellow Taoist Han, have you managed to identify which of the 13 heavenly cloud races I hail from?" Han Li narrowed his eyes and appraised the old man for a while before a wry smile appeared on his face. I'm afraid that's beyond a being with a cultivation base as lowly as mine." No matter how he looked at this Eccentric Su, he was completely identical to a normal human being, and there were no characteristics that revealed which race he was from. "It's no surprise that you weren't able to identify me, Brother Han. After all, us cloud beings have always been extremely proficient in concealment and disguise techniques, and even beings with higher cultivation bases than us wouldn't be able to glean our true forms if we insist on hiding them." It's just that I'm a bit of an anomaly in my race in that I cultivate an extremely yang-oriented fire attribute cultivation art, so my proficiency in disguise techniques is rather lacking compared to my brethren of the same cultivation base. As such, some of the fellow Taoists who have lived on this mountain for a long time are aware of what kind of being I am, eccentric Su chuckled. The cloud race? Isn't that the race with the smallest population among the heavenly cloud races, yet still ranks among the top 3 of the 13 races? Han Li was quite surprised to hear this. He had indeed heard of this cloud race, and he knew that it was one of the mysterious of the 13 heavenly cloud races. Looks like you know quite a lot about our cloud race, Brother Han. Our cloud race and the crystal race are the 2 races with the smallest populations among the 13 races. However, in contrast with the crystal race, us cloud beings are all quite powerful, which is why we were able to stake a claim among the top 3 races, eccentric Su said in a rather proud manner. My apologies for my ignorance. This is my first time meeting a being from your cloud race, Han Li sighed. There's no need to apologize. Our cloud race doesn't have a big population, but there are many of us here in Cloud City. It's just that very few of us appear as our true identities. Perhaps you've even met some being whom you thought were from other races, but were actually just cloud beings in disguise, eccentric Su said in a meaningful voice. Han Li was rather speechless upon hearing this. Eccentric Su then put away his smug expression as he adopted a slightly solemn look, and continued, however, even though our cloud race is known for our proficiency in disguise and concealment techniques, the real reason why we were able to claim a spot among the top 3 of the 13 heavenly cloud races is due to another natural ability of ours. I'm sure you've heard of it, right? Are you referring to bonded cloud beasts? Han Li asked as he raised an eyebrow. Indeed, bonded cloud beasts are creatures that lay somewhere in between the realms of spirit beasts and avatars. Only after cultivating our own cloud beast can beings like us truly become cloud beings, eccentric Su said in a slow voice. I've heard some rumors about the bonded cloud beasts of the cloud race. It's said that after cultivating a cloud beast, it would be the equivalent of an avatar with the exact same abilities as the cloud being that had cultivated it. During times of peril, cloud beings can even combine as one with their cloud beasts to form legendary cloud beast giant spirits. In doing so, not only would a cloud being's powers be significantly enhanced, they'd even be able to unleash some powerful abilities that would have been beyond their capabilities otherwise. Could it be that you wanted to speak to me about something related to your bonded cloud beast? Han Li asked as he stroked his chin. You are truly a wise man, fellow Taoist Han. I do indeed wish to speak with you about a cloud beast, but not my own. Instead, it's about my junior's bonded cloud beast, eccentric Zhu explained as he pointed to the young boy behind him. Oh, would you be able to elaborate further on that, fellow Taoist? Han Li cast his gaze toward the young boy with a slightly surprised look in his eyes. Of course I can. Truth be told, I don't have many direct lineal descendants, and Xianxia is the only junior of mine that is worth nurturing in my eyes. I don't mean to boast, but my junior's knack for cultivation is quite outstanding, even in the context of the entire cloud race. He should be able to become an upper race being in less than a century. From the benevolence in eccentric Su's eyes as he looked at the young boy, it was quite apparent that he held the boy in extremely high regard. You're far too kind, great-grandfather. I only have ordinary aptitude that's nothing to boast about, the young boy hurried said in a shy manner. Haha, you've already reached this cultivation base below 20 years of age. Your aptitude is even far superior to mine, so what's there to be modest about? Eccentric Su laughed heartily in response. Your junior does indeed possess astonishing talent, Han Li also chimed in with a smile. The young boy could only remain silent, with an embarrassed blush on his face. Eccentric Su's delighted expression then faded as he said in a heavy voice. Generally speaking, this junior of mine could well rise to even greater heights than me in the future, but unfortunately, there's an inherent flaw in his body that makes his future cultivation full of doubts and uncertainty. Han Li's eyes flashed upon hearing this, but he didn't say anything in reply as he knew that an explanation was definitely coming. As expected, after a brief pause, eccentric Su continued, he possesses outstanding aptitude, but some issues have arisen in his cultivation of his bonded cloud beast. It should have been cultivated long ago, but he's stuck at the final steps and unable to truly manifest it. According to past experience, it's naturally best for one to cultivate their bonded cloud beast as early as possible. Otherwise, his powers and future cultivation-based progression could be hampered. This is why I've decided to come to you, fellow Taoist Han. I'm not sure I understand what the connection is, Han Li said in a perplexed manner. This is indeed rather complex. To put it simply, I unintentionally discovered that the world's origin chi that I'd gathered from the phenomenon a few days ago can assist my junior in manifesting his bonded cloud beast. However, I'd already used up most of the world's origin chi I'd gathered last time, and the remaining amount isn't enough for him to use. As such, I can only come to you in the hopes that you could perhaps replicate that phenomenon. Eccentric Su finally disclosed the purpose of his visit. If the world's origin chi is useful to your junior, then I'm sure you can gather some yourself with ease. Why do you need to come and find me? Han Li asked in a calm manner. I've already conducted several experiments and found that normal world's origin chi is completely ineffective in aiding my junior to manifest his bonded cloud beast. As such, the world's origin chi gathered by the phenomenon that you conjured up must be special somehow, and contains something that is beyond my scope of comprehension. Perhaps only that special thing will be able to help Xianxia, Eccentric Su replied in a rather gloomy manner. I see, a thoughtful expression appeared on Han Li's face. He was naturally well aware that the so-called phenomenon that had taken place a few days ago was created by the dissipation of the true Kirin essence particle, so it was no surprise that this world's origin chi gathered was different from normal. However, it really was quite a surprise to him that this special type of the world's origin chi was beneficial to cloud beings in manifesting their bonded cloud beasts. I came here in the hopes that you can put the same world's origin chi as last time. If you can do that, I'll be sure to reward you handsomely for your efforts, Eccentric Su said with a hopeful expression on his face. It's not that I don't want to help you, it's just that this is not something that I can accomplish easily, Han Li replied in a hesitant manner. True Kirin essence was an extremely precious substance, and even though he couldn't refine it, it would still be immensely beneficial to the weeping soul beast, so he was naturally unwilling to extract more particles for no good reason. After all, even though there were many such particles in the weeping soul beast's body, who was to say that a single particle wouldn't be the difference between the weeping soul beast going through an evolution or not? Han Li was definitely unwilling to help a foreign being that he'd only just met at the expense of his spirit beast. Eccentric Su's heart sank slightly upon hearing this, but he still insisted. Are there some difficulties involved that you can't disclose, fellow Taoist Han? This is an extremely important matter to me, so I'm willing to offer you as many spirit stones as it takes. After a long pause, Han Li furrowed his brows as he explained, this is not an issue that can be resolved with spirit stones. Truth be told, the phenomenon that I created last time wasn't a result of a secret technique or cultivation art that I used. Instead, I had to use a disposable treasure to conjure up that phenomenon. As for exactly what treasure that is, forgive me for not being able to disclose that. However, I'm sure you can imagine just how precious this treasure is to be able to conjure up such a phenomenon. I don't have many of those treasures left on my hands at the moment, and I'm very reluctant to part with them. A disposable treasure. Eccentric Su's expression changed upon hearing this. Indeed, on top of that, this treasure is extremely useful to me as well, and I'm not willing to exchange it for any quantity of spirit stones, Han Li continued in a rather apologetic manner. If it's a disposable treasure, then it would indeed make sense that you're not willing to exchange it for spirit stones. But then again, regardless of how precious a treasure is, it must have a price. I have a collection of precious treasures as well, and I can exchange a treasure of equal value for this disposable treasure you're referring to. Eccentric Su had no intention of giving up. An exchange. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, and he really did seem to be tempted by this proposal. At the sight of Han Li's reaction, Eccentric Su knew that he had a chance, and he was elated as he immediately swept a sleeve over the table before him. A burst of red light swept forth, and 7 or 8 jade boxes of different sizes abruptly appeared on the table. These items are the most precious treasures among my collection, and 2 of them are treasures that I almost gave my life to obtain. You can have a look at all of them, then if any of them catch your eye, feel free to take it. On top of that, I'll also be owing you a big favor for this, Eccentric Su promised in a straightforward manner. Han Li smiled upon hearing this, and he cast his gaze toward the jade boxes on the table as a series of thoughts quickly flashed through his mind. This Eccentric Su was at the pinnacle of the spatial tempering stage, and he was also a cloud being who appeared to be quite powerful. As such, the most precious treasures among his collection were most likely quite precious indeed. However, he also possessed many astounding treasures, including 2 profound heavenly treasures, which even body integration stage beings wouldn't dare dream of obtaining. Hence, he wasn't actually very hopeful that there would be something here that could tempt him. In any case, unless he saw something that he really needed, he wasn't going to agree to an exchange. Even so, Hanli still smiled as he said, "In that case, I'd be honored to see these items among your collection." He raised a hand and made a grabbing motion as he spoke, upon which a fiery red jade box left the table and was drawn into his grasp. Hanli raised an eyebrow as he sensed the scorching aura emanating from the jade box, and he didn't dare to take it lightly as he conjured up a layer of spiritual light to protect his hand. At the same time, he flicked a finger from his other hand toward the jade box, and the lid flew off of its own accord. A scorching aura immediately erupted from within in a frenzy, and the temperature within the entire hall was raised dramatically. Blue light flashed through Hanli's eyes, and he immediately identified the item in the box to be a white egg that was around the size of a normal egg. However, there were red patterns all over its surface, and there was scintillating red light emanating from it that was swelling and receding incessantly. "What's this?" Hanli asked as a hint of surprise flashed through his eyes. He could sense that this egg possessed quite a powerful aura, but he naturally couldn't tell which type of beast this egg belonged to. "You really do have a good eye, fellow Taoist Han. You've picked out the only spirit egg among these treasures. This is the egg of an extremely rare primordial flame butterfly that I killed in a realm of lava deep underground. The butterfly's fire attribute powers were not inferior to mine, and I spent an entire year to set up a trap for it before I was finally able to kill it. I'm sure that if you were to carefully nurture this egg, it would hatch into a fantastic spirit beast. If it weren't for the fact that I already have a bonded cloud beast, which makes it impossible for me to divert my attention to other spirit beasts, perhaps I would have hatched this egg long ago," Eccentric Zoo said with a smile. Letter 1D5F3, letter 1D42B, letter 1D6AT, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D6A0, letter 1D6AT, letter 1D5F0, letter 1D5FC, letter 1D5FA. For this butterfly to possess fire attribute powers comparable to yours truly makes it quite an extraordinary creature. Unfortunately, I already have other spirit beasts as well. Otherwise, this would indeed be a highly sought-after treasure to me." Hanli withdrew his gaze from the egg as he clicked his tongue with wonder. Eccentric Sue faltered slightly upon hearing this before smiling as he said, "It's my fault for failing to consider that. At your current cultivation base, it's only natural that you've nurtured spirit beasts of your own already. It's all right, you can continue browsing through the other boxes." Hanli nodded before placing the lid back onto the jade box, then gently tossing it forward. A burst of azure light immediately surged out his sleeve, carrying the jade box onto the table in a stable manner before sweeping another jade box toward him. Hanli raised a hand, and the second jade box fell into his grasp. Time passed by slowly, and after about 15 minutes, Hanli had seen most of the treasures that Eccentric Sue had brought out. Most of them contained rare materials, and there were also 1 or 2 powerful-looking treasures, as well as even a vial of pills that could assist in enhancing a spatial tempering stage being's cultivation base. These items were all extremely precious, and they were even superior to many of the auction items that had been sold during the 4 races auction. However, none of them managed to catch Hanli's eye, and he merely inspected them one by one with a faint smile on his face before putting them away. After he'd appraised the item in the final jade box and set it down again, Eccentric Sue's expression was starting to become a little strained. He couldn't help but ask, "Were none of these items of interest to you, fellow Taoist?" In all honesty, these are all indeed extremely precious items. In particular, the egg of that primordial flame butterfly would be a priceless treasure to fellow Taoists using fire attribute cultivation methods. If you were to sell them in an auction, they'd definitely be able to fetch in excess of 10 million spirit stones each. However, to me, there. Hanli shook his head in a resigned manner, and his voice trailed off mid-sentence. Even though Hanli didn't finish his sentence, Eccentric Sue naturally understood the unspoken implications, and his brows furrowed as he asked, "Why don't you tell me what kind of treasure you'd like in exchange for that disposable treasure of yours? Even if I don't have it, I have many acquaintances, and I could try and source it for you." Hanli fell silent upon hearing this. There naturally were items that he wanted, not taking into account other matters. Just the rare materials that Qing Yuanzi was asking for comprised of quite an extensive list. However, it was exactly because of this that he found it difficult to state any terms. If he were to use the true Kirin essence to exchange for only a few of the materials on the list, it naturally wouldn't be worth it for him. However, if he were to ask for too many materials in return, eccentric Su would most likely be of the opinion that Han Li was simply trying to take advantage of him, and he'd essentially be making an enemy for no good reason. After all, only he was aware of the value of the true Kirin essence, but that was not something that he could disclose to eccentric Su, thereby resulting in this predicament. Fellow Taoist Su, the items I require are all extremely rare, and even you wouldn't be able to source them, so there's no point in disclosing them. As for whether I can replicate that phenomenon for you, Han Li heaved a faint sigh with a hesitant look on his face. Eccentric Su's expression darkened further at the sight of the hesitant expression on Han Li's face. He glanced at the young boy behind him, then gritted his teeth and pulled out a blue jade box as he said, "Would you like to have a look at this item as well? It's even more valuable than all of the other items I've shown you. One of the elders of our cloud race also requires this item, and I wanted to offer it to him in exchange for some benefits, but the future of my junior clearly takes priority over that. I'm sure that even if this item isn't something that you're looking for, it's at least of equal value to the disposable treasure you possess." Han Li wasn't surprised at all to see that eccentric Su had held something back in reserve. If he were in eccentric Su's shoes, he wouldn't bring out the most valuable item he had to offer from the get-go either. As for the story about how he was planning to give this item to one of the elders of his race, that most likely wasn't true, and Han Li naturally wasn't going to take it seriously. Thus, he nodded in response before making a grabbing motion to draw the blue jade box into his grasp. As soon as his fingers came into contact with the box, a strange chilling sensation suddenly ran through his entire body, and his heart jolted with shock in response. He didn't know what kind of spirit jade this box had been refined from, but it was even colder than profound jade. As such, Han Li was rather intrigued as he slowly removed the lid of the box, and golden light flashed as the content of the box was revealed. This was a fist-sized chunk of crimson metal that was radiating shimmering golden light. A hint of bewilderment flashed through Han Li's eyes as soon as he caught sight of the item, as if he'd managed to identify it, but he still seemed to be in disbelief. All of a sudden, Han Li flipped a hand over, and a short white sword appeared in his grasp amid a flash of spiritual light. The sword was only around half a foot in length. It was shimmering with a cold light, but it was quite clearly only a very ordinary treasure. Han Li flicked his wrist, and the sword immediately shot forth into the jade box, striking the chunk of crimson metal in a flash. An astonishing scene then ensued. In the instant that the tip of the sword came into contact with the piece of crimson metal, it melted in a soundless manner like a burning candle, then disappeared into nothingness in the blink of an eye. "Flame metal essence," Han Li exclaimed through a slightly dry throat. "You sure are quite knowledgeable, fellow Taoist Han. This flame metal essence is a top-grade material for refining fire attribute treasures, and if you were to add even a tiny portion of it to a normal treasure, that treasure would be given fire attribute powers. Regardless of how precious your disposable treasure is, I'm sure this item will be enough to exchange for it," eccentric Su said in a slow voice as he appraised the blue jade box in Han Li's hand. The bewilderment gradually faded from Han Li's eyes, and he suddenly smiled as he said, "I really do have a use for this flame metal essence, but I'm naturally also aware of just how precious it is. How about this? In addition to replicating that phenomenon for you, I'll also throw in 5 million spirit stones for you." Eccentric Su had originally been quite dejected that he had to part with this precious treasure, but after hearing Han Li's proposal, his expression eased slightly, and he nodded as he replied, "All right, we'll do as you say." To him, the flame metal essence was indeed extremely precious, but it still couldn't compare with the future of this junior on whom he'd placed such high hopes. Thus Han Li flipped a hand over to stow the blue jade box away, and eccentric Su began, "Now then, about the phenomenon. Rest assured, brother Su, take this bag of spirit stones first, then go to the summit of this spirit mountain. I'll unleash the treasure right away to conjure up the phenomenon, and all you have to do is wait and harvest the world's origin chi when it appears," Han Li explained with a smile before sweeping a hand over his storage bracelet, producing a leather pouch of spirit stones that he tossed over to eccentric Su. Eccentric was clearly not expecting Han Li to fulfill his end of the transaction so quickly, and he faltered slightly as he reflexively caught the bag, then immediately rose to his feet in an elated manner. "All right, I'll be waiting at the mountain summit then." Thus, he hurriedly departed with the young body before flying up the mountain. After the two had left his cave abode, Han Li was unable to repress his excitement any longer as a faint smile appeared on his face. I didn't think I'd obtain the flame metal essence so quickly. In addition to the golden marrow crystal insects and the blood apricot, I've gathered all of the main materials required to manifest my provenance true devil projection. Now, all I need to do is gather some secondary materials, and I'll be able to manifest a substantial body for my projection, Han Li murmured to himself with a bright gleam in his eyes. After that, the process was quite simple. Han Li released the weeping soul beast again, then extracted another true Kirin essence particle from its body before intentionally refining it with his nascent flames. Thus, the same explosion took place, and the particle burst through the ceiling of his cave abode before conjuring up the same astonishing phenomenon again, drawing all of the nearby world's origin chi toward it. Eccentric Su was already well prepared, and he was ecstatic as he immediately grabbed the crimson gourd that was hanging from his waist before hurling it into the air, upon which the gourd transformed into a fiery worm. Mere moments later, all of the world's origin chi above the spirit mountain was absorbed by the fiery worm, and the entire process was even faster than it had been last time. As such, not many cultivators living on the spirit mountain had been alerted by this phenomenon. After that, Eccentric Su transformed the fiery worm back into his crimson gourd, then took the young boy back to his cave abode in high spirits. After witnessing all of this through a copper mirror in the hall of his cave abode, Han Li smiled as he ceased his secret technique, then immediately stowed the mirror away. After that, he gave Dal a few instructions using his spiritual sense before departing from his cave abode again. On this occasion, Han Li visited several large material shops in Cloud City, spending a staggering amount of spirit stones to purchase over 30 types of different materials before finally returning to his cave abode. Luckily for him, Cloud City was one of the few super cities on the territory of the 13 heavenly clawed races. Otherwise, he may not have been able to source some of the rarest materials he required if he were in another city. Half a month after Han Li had gone into seclusion in his cave abode again, a major event took place in Cloud City. Letter 1D4 1F, letter 1D5 6 3, letter 1D5 F2, letter 1D5 5 6, letter 1D5 6 8, letter 1D5 F2, letter 1D5 F0, letter 1D6 9 8, letter 1D4 to 6. As a result, the city's defenses were tightened even further, and almost twice as many people were deployed to patrol the city compared to before. There were even some newly arrived outsiders in the city that were tracked down by some mysterious individuals, and extremely exhaustive investigations were conducted on these outsiders. Some of the outsiders who were deemed to be overly suspicious mysteriously disappeared off the face of this world. Within an extremely secretive hall in Cloud City, a dozen or so important figures were seated in 2 rows on a pair of wooden benches. Among these people, there were some who were familiar to Han Li, such as the 3 elders of the myriad ancient race, Kai Lidding of the crystal race, and Duan Tianren of the stone cocoon race. The others were all beings whom Han Li had never met before, but the spiritual pressure emanating from their bodies indicated that they were beings of the same caliber as the likes of Kai and Jizzy. All of these vastly renowned holy race beings were gathered with solemn and cautious expressions on their face, while a man and a woman sat at the very center of the hall. The man wore a set of white robes and appeared to be around 27 to 28 years of age, while the woman had a head of golden hair, but a face so deeply wrinkled that it appeared she was barely even able to keep her eyes open. If Han Li were present at the scene, he wouldn't have paid much attention to the elderly woman, but he certainly would have been quite alarmed by the sight of the white-robed young man. This was none other than the Grand Ascension cultivator with the Wang surname, who had appeared during the last 4 races auction. At this moment, the young man wore a thunderous expression, and there was a menacing aura emanating from his body. It's been so many days, yet all of you still haven't managed to find the Jiao Kai race infiltrator. It looks like the infiltrator has already fled Cloud City or is hiding somewhere that's beyond the scope of your search. Fellow Taoist Bai, your water wraith race has always been responsible for this area as of late. What do you think? The white-robed young man suddenly asked in a cold voice. The person that he had questioned was a man in a brocade robe with a head of white hair, but a set of youthful facial features. His expression soured slightly upon hearing this question, but he still hurriedly rose to his feet as he cupped his fist in a salute, and replied, "Senior Wang, we've already deployed all of the beings in our race who are proficient in interrogative techniques, and investigated all of the suspicious beings who have come to our Cloud City in the past 6 months. During the process, we've even weeded out hundreds of spies that had been planted in our Cloud City from various other races, but we've still been unable to find that Jiao Kai race being who infiltrated our enshrinement hall. I think the infiltrator has most likely already left Cloud City. Otherwise, there's no way that he would have been able to escape such an exhaustive investigation. That's not necessarily the case. Perhaps that infiltrator is very proficient in disguise techniques, and you may have unwittingly set them free already. A figure enshrouded in gray light remarked in an indifferent manner. HMPH, our water wraith race may be lacking in combat prowess and power compared to other races, but our expertise in disguise techniques is definitely among the best in all of the 13 races. If you think your yin demon race can do better, then I'll naturally be happy to hand over this duty to you, Brother Kang Ying, the white-haired being replied in an abrasive manner. I'm only saying this as a mere suggestion. There's no way that our yin demon race would be more suited to this task than your water wraith race. The gray figure chuckled in a nonchalant manner. Cold light flashed through the white-haired man's eyes, and he was just about to say something else when the white-robed young man interjected. All right, that's enough bickering from you two. There's no way that Jiao Kai race infiltrator could have managed to escape. After I discovered that that thing had been stolen, I immediately issued a command to seal off all of the exits of the city. During the past few days, no one has been allowed to leave, so not even a single mosquito could have flown out of Cloud City. On top of that, according to one of the guards who had been injured by the infiltrator, that being was only at the spatial tempering stage, so it's very unlikely that they could have fooled fellow Taoist Bai and his subordinates. In that case, this indicates that the infiltrator has most likely been in our Cloud City for a long time. As such, we have to investigate suspicious targets that have entered the city even longer than 6 months ago. Both the white-haired man and the gray figure immediately fell silent in an obedient manner upon hearing this. If that really is the case, then things are going to get quite troublesome. If we begin investigating all suspicious beings who were allowed into the city from even further back than half a year ago, there are simply way too many beings to investigate. If all of the outsiders begin to panic upon realizing what we're doing, then that would spell even more trouble for us, Kai Jizzy suddenly said after clearing his throat. That's indeed a possibility, and it's also what I'm most worried about. However, this infiltrator has stolen the blueprints of the restriction formation that we just set up in the entire Cloud City, so we can't let them escape without paying a price. Otherwise, if the army of the Jiao Kai race were to reach our city, that restriction would be virtually useless against them, the white-robed young man replied. That's a very valid concern, Senior Wang. As long as the Jiao Kai race infiltrator remains in the city, we naturally can't allow them to leave. However, if we were to really conduct an exhaustive investigation, we could perhaps keep it up for a month or two with no issues. But if that infiltrator decides to play the waiting game and hide somewhere in the city for years on end, we can't afford to keep this up forever, an elderly man with a long black beard said in a grim voice. Oh, does that mean you have a good idea you'd like to propose, fellow Taoist Ning? The white-robed man asked. I don't have any valuable insights to offer, but we have Fairy Kai here, don't we? With Fairy Kai's intellect and talents, I'm sure she'll be able to find a solution with ease. The elderly man hurriedly waved his hands in response before suddenly thrusting Kai Lidding under the limelight. Letter 1D5 F3, letter 1D6 9B, letter 1D6 AT, letter 1D6 80, letter 1D6 04, letter 1D5 56, letter 1D5 F0, letter 1D5 60, letter 1D4 26. Kai Lidding's eyes flashed upon hearing this, and she smiled as she said, Sure you jest, Brother Ning. With Senior Wang and Mountain Master Sha here, there's no place for my little tricks. I can only do my best to fulfill the duty that I'm assigned. Fellow Taoist Kai, now's not the time for modesty. I want to hear what insights you have to offer as an elder of the crystal race, the white-robed man insisted in a serious manner. Kai Lidding's brows furrowed slightly, but she then quickly reverted back to her normal expression as she rose to her feet, then extended a bow toward each of the two beings seated at the center of the hall. In that case, I'll do my best to propose a solution. All right, please go ahead, Fairy Kai. I'm sure you won't disappoint us, fellow Taoist Kai. Everyone present smiled and offered words of encouragement. It appeared that even though Kai Lidding possessed one of the lowest cultivation bases among all of the beings present, she seemed to be quite a popular and influential figure. Even the elderly woman that had her eyes virtually half closed opened her eyes slightly wider as she appraised Kai Lidding. The white-robed man beside her was also looking at Kai Lidding with an expectant gaze. After looking at everyone gathered in the hall, Kai Living said, "In my opinion, it's not a good idea to pour all of our resources into conducting an exhaustive and lengthy investigation. Instead, we should lay a trap to lure out the infiltrator." "What kind of trap do you propose?" the white-robed man asked. Kai Living replied, "Regardless of what kind of method the infiltrator will adopt to try and escape, it looks like it'll be quite difficult to capture them in a short time. As such, I suggest conducting an exhaustive investigation for a month, doing everything we can within reason to search for the infiltrator. If we catch them during this time, then that would be ideal. However, if we fail to do so, we can slowly withdraw resources from the search, thereby making it appear as if we're giving up and conceded that we won't be catching the infiltrator. But in reality, we'll be deploying more people to the 4 city gates, where they'll be conducting investigations from the shadows. On top of that, I suggest organizing a group of elite individuals who continue to investigate suspicious beings leaving Cloud City during the upcoming period in secret. In that case, if the infiltrator is in a hurry to deliver the blueprints back to the Jiao Kai race, they'll be sure to fall into our trap. On the contrary, if they plan to continue hiding in the city, I'm sure that once it becomes seemingly apparent that we're calling off the search, they'll gradually grow complacent, and that'll be their downfall." "That is indeed a good idea, but what if that infiltrator is extremely proficient in disguise techniques, and they manage to bypass our investigation after we open the 4 city gates? Won't we be shooting ourselves in the foot and allowing them to escape instead?" The white-robed man initially nodded in response, but then shook his head quickly thereafter. Everyone else thought that Kai Ling's plan was quite good, but now that the white-robed man was stating a different opinion, everyone was rather hesitant again. I've actually only disclosed half the plan, Senior Wang. I think you'll be interested to hear the second half of my plan," Kai Living said with a smile. Her lips then began to move slightly, but she uttered no sounds, and it was quite apparent that she was transmitting her voice directly to the white-robed man. The man was initially rather taken aback by this, but after listening for a while, a hint of surprise appeared on his face, which then quickly turned into elation. Only after close to 10 minutes did Kai Ling finally cease her voice transmission. "Is that true?" The white-robed man took a deep breath before suddenly casting his gaze toward Kai and Jizzy. "I wouldn't dare joke about such an important matter," Kai Ling replied with a serious look on her face. All of the other holy race beings present wore different expressions as they glanced at one another in the aftermath of that mysterious exchange between Kai Living and the white-robed man. However, all of them were naturally smart enough not to inquire about the contents of the voice transmission. "In that case, I'm certainly convinced. Mistress Xia, I'm sure you just heard fellow Taoist Kai's voice transmission as well. What do you think?" The white-robed man suddenly turned to the elderly woman beside him in a polite manner. "I have no objections. I'm just an old woman who doesn't want to think anymore. All I'm responsible for is helping out when we encounter enemies that are too powerful for these little guys to deal with. I'm not going to pay any heed to anything else, and nor do I have the energy to do so. Seeing as you've formulated a plan, I'm going back to rest now. Fellow Taoist Wang, you can make all of the decisions that arise from here onward," the old woman said in a feeble voice as she rose to her feet in a wobbly manner. A wry smile appeared on the white-robed man's face upon hearing this. However, before he had a chance to say anything else, the woman had already departed, and she really did leave just as she said she would. All of the other beings present were naturally slightly bemused to see this. This elderly woman had always been extremely mysterious. All of them knew that she was a Grand Ascension stage being, but no one knew which of the 13 races she hailed from, nor what kind of ability she'd cultivated to progress to the Grand Ascension stage. According to some rumors, she was the oldest of all of the current Grand Ascension stage beings in the 13 races, and it was said that she'd lived for an unimaginably long time. At the very least, all of the cultivators had known of her existence for many years. As such, even though she appeared to be a frail old woman who could be blown over by a stiff breeze, even the white-robed man regarded her as a senior, so all of the other beings present naturally treated her with the utmost respect. After the old woman finally hobbled out of the hall, the white-robed man could only heave a resigned sigh before withdrawing his gaze. After a brief pause, the white-robed man announced in a decisive manner, "Seeing as Mistress Xia has already left and there's not really anything left to discuss this matter, we'll all do as fellow Taoist Kai says. Fairy Kai, fellow Taoist Bai, I'll leave this to the two of you. Everyone else, you must cooperate with the two of them to the best of your abilities." Everyone in the hall naturally agreed to this arrangement. All right, let's discuss the matters surrounding the vast glacial realm next. Kai and Jizzy, you can tell everyone about this. The white-robed man suddenly changed the subject. Everyone's expressions changed slightly upon hearing the words, vast glacial realm. Some of the more impatient beings present couldn't help but ask, what's going on, fellow Taoist Kayan? Is the vast glacial realm about to open soon? Meanwhile, Kale Living and Duan Tianren exchanged a glance in a reflexive manner before immediately averting their eyes. The vast glacial apparatus in the sentient hall of our myriad ancient race has displayed a reaction 2 days ago, and according to past experience, this means that the vast glacial realm will open in a few months to 3 or 4 years. Kai and Jizzy explained in an unhurried manner. It's opening that quickly. This is not a good time. Stir immediately ran through the entire hall. The vast glacial badges had only appeared not long ago, so it's indeed rather out of the ordinary that the vast glacial apparatus is displaying a reaction so soon. This also coincides with the invasion of the Jiao race, so we won't be able to focus wholeheartedly on preparing for this event. However, the opening of the vast glacial realm is a great opportunity for the races all over the Thunder continent to receive a boost in power, so we naturally can't just not prepare for it, either. As such, I need everyone to formulate a course of action, Kai and Jizzy said with a serious look on his face. Indeed, fellow Taoist Kayan, the invasion of the Jiao Kai race has drawn most of our attention, but thankfully, this isn't the first time we've had to prepare for the opening of the vast glacial realm, so there's no need to panic even if it's happening a little earlier than normal, the white-robed man said with a nod. Honest, whether we can reap much rewards from the vast glacial realm depends almost entirely on the luck and potential of our juniors. All we can do is ascertain the roster that is to enter the vast glacial realm as soon as possible, then set up the formation required for them to enter the realm. On this occasion, our 13 races didn't manage to secure too many vast glacial badges, and our Cloud City only has 2. As such, we only need to prepare 2 formations on our end. The other vast glacial badges will naturally be taken care of by others, so we don't need to worry about them. A burly man with a body that was as black as charcoal chimed in agreement. Indeed. However, we have many juniors in Cloud City who are at the pinnacle of the spatial tempering stage, so it won't be easy to ascertain this roster. In order to prevent that Jiao Kai race infiltrator from wreaking havoc during this time, we have to make sure that the 2 teleportation formations are extremely well guarded. Some of the beings present were quite elated, while others were rather concerned, and all of them offered their opinions. Meanwhile, the white-robed man merely listened to their discussion with a smile on their faces, and when the chatter finally died down, he turned to Kai Living and asked, "Fairy Kai, do you have anything to add?" Kai Living faltered slightly after being singled out, but she then immediately smiled as she replied, "All of the areas have been addressed in detail by all of my fellow Taoists, so there's nothing for me to add." After a brief pause for contemplation, the white-robed man finally made his decision. "All right, in that case, we'll prepare for the opening of the vast glacial realm just like we've always done in the past. As for the specific roster of juniors to be sent into the realm, I'll leave that to all of you to decide. However, all of the beings chosen must be at least at the late spatial tempering stage, and we must deploy 3 times as many people as we have in the past to guard the teleportation formations. On top of that, the area in a radius of 5 kilometers around the 2 formations will be sealed off as a restricted area that's barred from entry to unrelated individuals. Only the myriad ancient race knows how to set up the formations, so I'll leave that to you, fellow Taoist Kayan. Kayan Jizzy and the 2 myriad ancient race elders next to him naturally bowed and accepted these orders. A thought then suddenly occurred to the white-robed man, and he asked, "By the way, have you chosen the candidates to activate the vast glacial badges?" "One of the candidates has already been chosen, but the other badge has already been activated," Kai and Jizzy replied after a brief hesitant pause. "If I recall correctly, all of the candidates chosen to activate the vast glacial badges are selected through a rigorous selection process, and the badges are only activated on the cusp of the opening of the vast glacial realm. Why was a badge activated so early this time?" The white-robed man's expression darkened upon hearing this. "Please forgive me, Senior. The situation with this vast glacial badge is rather special, and it had already been activated by the time we obtained it. Here, what happened." Thus, Kai and Jizzy gave a careful recount of what had happened with Han Li. "I see. So that being isn't a heavenly cloud being. In fact, he isn't even from our continent. the white-robed man surmised with a surprised look on his face. Indeed, I have also agreed to let him use the super teleportation formation after returning from the vast glacial realm, but he has to supply the spirit stones required for that himself, Xianxia replied in a truthful manner. The white-robed man's expression returned to normal before he continued. That's not really an issue, but what's important is that you make sure there's nothing fishy about him. Rest assured, Senior Wang, we've made sure that there are no issues with this man. We're only using him so that others can be sent into the vast glacial realm, and he's been under our surveillance this entire time, so he won't be able to do anything that's of detriment to us. After they enter the vast glacial realm, they'll all split up, so there won't be any problems, Xianxia assured in a confident manner. After contemplating this notion for a short while, the white-robed man also decided that this wasn't an issue, so he nodded and said, "Seeing as you're so confident and the vast glacial badge has already been activated by this person, then so be it. When the time comes, tell the others to conduct more surveillance on this man from the shadows." Xianxia naturally accepted this arrangement as well. After the three myriad ancient race elders had taken their seats, a holy race being with dark green skin stood up and reported, "Fellow Taoist Lu and the others have sent information back from the front lines. The Jiao Kai race has increased the size of their army again, and there are even 5 or 6 more holy grade beings among them. This development has caught us off guard, and 3 of our cities have already been conquered, thereby placing us firmly on the back foot. It appears that the Jiao Kai race fully intends to expand the scale of this war. HMPH, deploy 5 holy race beings and 1,000 upper race beings from the city to the front lines right away. If they want to escalate this battle, then we'll be happy to respond in kind." The white-robed man harumphed coldly. "Yes." After that, other holy race beings also began to report some important matters. In the end, this meeting between the most powerful beings of Cloud City lasted for close to an hour. Following its conclusion, all of the holy race beings immediately departed to make preparations. Meanwhile, Han Li was still in seclusion, cultivating arduously in his cave abode. On a certain day a year later, Han Li suddenly emerged from his cave abode and left Cloud City. However, he mysteriously returned to the city just half a day later, then entered his secret chamber again. Time slowly passed by, and 3 years flew past in the blink of an eye. Within the secret chamber inside Han Li's cave abode, it was quite a dimly lit environment, and there were 3 humanoid figures seated on a futon each. One of them was shimmering with golden light with a layer of golden scales over their skin. Another had black chi surging all around their body, making it impossible to glean their true appearance. The final humanoid figure was glowing with purple light, but their skin was remarkably green. All 3 of them were making different hand seals, seated in a completely stationary manner. After an indeterminate period of time, the golden humanoid figure suddenly stirred before opening his eyes. 2 balls of piercing blue light immediately erupted from within his pupils. "What's going on? Why has that person come to find me? Could it be?" The golden humanoid figure murmured to himself. Letter 1D453, letter 1D4C7, letter 1D626, letter 212F, letter 1D638, letter 1D626, letter 1D450, letter 1D45C, letter 1D4C2. Immediately thereafter, he waved a sleeve through the air, and a ball of white light shot forth from within before hovering in the air above. The entire secret chamber was immediately illuminated by bright white light, thereby revealing the 3 humanoid figures in a high level of clarity. The golden humanoid figure sitting in the middle was none other than Han Li, and his brows were furrowed tightly, seemingly in deep thought. The green skin being emanating purple light from its body was identical in appearance to Han Li, and he was appraising Han Li with curiosity in its remarkably clear eyes. At this moment, a burst of Buddhist chants rang out from within the cloud of black chi, which slowly dissipated to reveal a monstrous being with 3 heads and 6 arms. The monstrous being was around 20 feet tall, and its body was also shimmering with golden light. 2 of its faces had extremely clear facial features, while the final face was completely devoid of all features, striking the beholder with quite a harrowing sensation. At this moment, the golden giant suddenly opened the eyes on its 2 clear faces, and its pupils were like a pair of black holes that threatened to suck in the beholder's soul. "A guest has arrived. You 2 can keep cultivating on your own while I go out to meet our guest," Han Li instructed before flying toward a wall as a streak of golden light. The streak of light disappeared into the wall in a flash, and moments later, azure light flashed from the stone door of the cave abode, which then slowly swung open as Han Li made his way out in a calm and collected manner. Han Li pays his respects to Senior Kai. May I ask why you've decided to pay a visit to my humble abode? Han Li greeted with a respectful bow. The guest standing outside was a slender and elegant woman. It was none other than Kai Liding of the Crystal Race. Am I not welcome here, fellow Taoist Han? Kai Liding asked with a smile. Of course you are, Senior Kai. It is a great honor for me that you've decided to visit. May I ask who this fellow Taoist is? Han Li chuckled before turning his attention to the woman standing behind Kai Liding. She appeared to also be a woman with a gorgeous figure, but she wore a white hood on her head, and her facial features had been obscured by a ball of crystalline light. This is a new disciple of mine, Kai Liding explained in an extremely concise manner. The woman also nodded in silence to affirm this. It would naturally be unwise for Han Li to ask any further questions, so he could only invite the two into his cave abode. Thus, not long after that, all three of them were seated in the hall of his cave abode. A humanoid puppet immediately arrived at Han Li's behest to offer some spirit fruits and a few cups of spirit tea. Kai Liding was quite intrigued as she took a sip of her cup of spirit tea, upon which a hint of surprise flashed through her eyes. What potent spiritual qi! These tea leaves seem to have come from a tea tree that's over 1,000 years old. On top of that, the tea tree itself also seems to be of a rare breed. In that case, such spirit tea will be hard to find even in Cloud City, Kai Liding praised after taking a few more sips. If you like this tea, I have some more of these tea leaves, and I can give them all to you, Senior, Han Li said with a smile before sweeping a sleeve over the table, upon which a white box appeared out of thin air. In that case, don't mind if I do, fellow Taoist Han. I really am quite a fan of this tea, Kai Liding chuckled. She raised a hand as she spoke, drawing the jade box into her grasp before it then vanished in a flash. Han Li smiled upon seeing this, and began to discuss some matters revolving around cultivation with Kai Liding, seemingly completely disinterested in finding out the purpose for her visit. Kai Liding smiled upon seeing this, and also discussed some inconsequential topics with Han Li. Thus, 2 full hours passed by, yet the two of them were still engaged in a spirited conversation, looking as if they could chat for another 2 hours. However, the woman wearing the white hood was starting to become quite impatient. She was casting her gaze between Han Li and Kai Liding incessantly and growing rather fidgety. Kai Liding's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, but a smile then quickly reappeared on her face as she said, "Fellow Taoist Han, it's only been a few years since I last saw you, but you've become a lot more patient since then. Even after this long, you still haven't asked me about the purpose of my visit. Could it be that you cultivated some kind of special secret technique or experienced a spike in your cultivation base recently?" "Surely you jest, Senior. I have no patience to speak of. It's just that I naturally wouldn't dare to ask the purpose of your visit before you decide to tell me," Han Li replied in a respectful manner. "Looks like I was mistaken then. However, I trust you've already guessed the reason why I've come here today," Kai Liding said with a nonchalant smile. I do indeed have a hunch that your visit has something to do with the vast glacial realm, Senior," Han Li replied in a truthful manner. As expected, you've hit the nail right on the head, fellow Taoist Han. This is indeed why I've paid you a visit with my disciple in accompaniment, and I'm sure that fellow Taoist Duan will also come to visit you with someone else soon," Kai Liding chuckled in response. Han Li faltered slightly upon hearing this, and he cast his gaze toward the hooded woman with a hint of surprise in his eyes. "In that case, could it be that your disciple is?" "That's right, this disciple of mine is one of the beings who possess an essence-effused body that we were talking about last time," Kai Liding confirmed. "If I recall correctly, didn't you say that this person should be a guest member of your race? How has she suddenly become your disciple?" Han Li asked in a surprised manner. "What's so strange about that? I told you earlier that this is a new disciple of mine," Kai Liding replied with a smile. "I see, apologies for my foolishness," Han Li said with a wry smile. "Do you think I only accepted this disciple due to the matter surrounding the vast glacial realm?" Kai Liding suddenly asked with a meaningful look in her eyes. "I wouldn't dare to think that." Han Li's expression abruptly changed slightly upon hearing this. "It's all right even if you do think that way. However, I can assure you that my disciple was fully willing to accept me as her master, and I didn't force her into this arrangement in any way," Kai Liding said in a nonchalant manner. "I was indeed wholeheartedly willing to become master's disciple. the hooded woman finally spoke for the first time. Her voice was a little low and deep, but it was very captivating and pleasant to listen to. Letter 1D487, letter 1D4FB, letter 1D4E, letter 1D4E, letter 1D66C, letter 1D65A, letter 1D4EC, letter 1D4F8, letter 1D4AT. A sheepish look appeared on Han Li's face upon hearing this, and he could only offer an awkward smile. The purpose of my visit is actually very simple. I only wanted you to get to know this disciple of mine. Once you enter the vast glacial realm, the two of you have to work together, Kai Liting said in a slow voice. Does that mean the vast glacial realm is about to open soon, Senior? Han Li asked. Indeed, fellow Taoist. Barring any mishaps, the vast glacial realm should be opening a month from now, Kai Liting replied as her smile faded. A month? It's coming up that soon. Han Li really was quite surprised to hear this. Are there some matters that you haven't finished attending to, fellow Taoist Han? Kai Liting asked. No, it's just that if I had another few decades to work with, I could perhaps get my cultivation base up to the pinnacle of the 7th tier. Perhaps then, I'd be able to use the abundant spiritual qi within the vast glacial realm to make a breakthrough. Han Li sighed in a resigned manner. That is indeed a wasted opportunity. However, at your current cultivation base, it won't be too difficult to break through the bottleneck. On top of that, Brother Su and I have already promised you many benefits, so you should learn to be content with what you have, fellow Taoist Han, Kai Liting said in an indifferent voice. Han Li's heart stirred upon hearing this, but he still forced himself to maintain a smile as he replied, Rest assured, Senior. Even if I wanted to refrain from entering the vast glacial realm, Senior Kaian Jizzy definitely wouldn't allow it. It's good that you understand that, fellow Taoist. Aside from introducing my disciple to you, I also have some other matters to discuss with you. The vast glacial realm and those restricted ruins are extremely perilous, so you must prepare some treasures prior to embarking on your journey. Kai Liting nodded before changing the subject. Han Li was quite elated to hear this, and he said in an earnest manner, Please enlighten me, Senior. Kai Liting nodded with a pleased expression upon seeing this before continuing. I'm not going to tell you about the main aspects to look out for in the vast glacial realm. Someone will notify you of all that prior to your departure. Instead, I'm going to be telling you about some insights I gleaned from my past trip into the vast glacial realm, as well as some hazards that may be easily overlooked. Firstly, after entering the vast glacial realm, it's best to avoid the regions that are extremely hot or extremely cold. Those places have either been inhabited by powerful ice attribute beasts or had extremely powerful restrictions set up. At your cultivation bases, entering those regions will almost definitely spell certain death. Secondly, if you encounter. Thus, Kai Liting passed on her experiences with a serious look on her face, and both Han Li and her disciple listened with rapt focus. After all, this advice could potentially save their lives, so they certainly didn't dare to ignore it. Lastly, remember if you see a strange crimson cloud in the distance, run away as fast as you can and get as far away as possible from it. If you hesitate even for a split second, you'll be dead for sure. As for the specific reason behind that, I'm not going to elaborate on it. You'll find out why if you encounter such a phenomenon. All right, I've said everything that needs to be said. Have you committed all of that to memory, fellow Taoist Han? Kai Liting asked as she turned to Han Li. I have. Thank you for disclosing this valuable information, Senior, Han Li replied in a respectful manner. All right, that's all I came here to do, so I'll be going back with my disciple now. The next time we meet will most likely be on the day when the vast glacial realm opens, Kai Liting said with a smile before rising to her feet. Her disciple also followed suit and stood up as well. I'll see you out, Senior. Han Li naturally also hurriedly rose to his feet to accompany the two of them out of his cave abode. There's no need for that. My disciple and I can leave on our own. Otherwise, suspicions may be raised if we were to be seen together, Kai Liting replied. All right, then forgive me for not being able to accompany you to the door, Han Li said with a slight bow. Kai Liting nodded before departing with her disciple. However, a thought then suddenly seemed to have occurred to her, and she turned around as she said, How foolish of me. There's something that I almost forgot to tell you. Han Li faltered slightly upon hearing this before immediately asking, What is it, Senior? Take this and make sure to keep it safe. A combination secret technique is recorded in here, and it's best for you to memorize it before you set off into the vast glacial realm. After the three of you are teleported into the realm, don't be in a hurry to set off immediately. Instead, practice this secret technique that combines your divine essence-effused light into one first. The secret technique is not only necessary to break the restriction on that place, it's also a powerful weapon that can be used against enemies. I wanted to get the three of you to rehearse it prior to entering the vast glacial realm, but there was a possibility that the secret technique could have been stolen by someone else in Cloud City, so you'll have to rehearse it after entering the vast glacial realm. Kai Liting raised a hand as she spoke, sending a streak of white light flying toward Han Li. Han Li made a grabbing motion in a rather surprised manner to draw the white light into his grasp, then looked down to discover that this was a white jade tablet. A combination secret technique, Han Li murmured to himself before seeping his spiritual sense into it in a curious manner. He had heard of this type of secret technique before. Generally speaking, they were designed to combine the powers of many beings to create power superior to that of the sum of the participants, and they were very rare secret techniques. After a while, Han Li withdrew his spiritual sense from the jade tablet, only to find that Kai Liting and her disciple were already nowhere to be seen. Han Li wasn't surprised by this, and he swept a sleeve through the air in an expressionless manner. A burst of bright azure light immediately radiated from his body, and he abruptly vanished. Moments later, golden light suddenly flashed within the secret chamber, and Han Li reappeared out of thin air before casting his gaze toward the monstrous being and the green Han Li, both of whom were still in seated meditation. However, they seemed to have also sensed his arrival, and they both opened their eyes to meet his gaze. I wanted to cultivate the two of you further before entering the vast glacial realm, but it looks like there's no time for that now. I have to prepare some things and refine the extreme essence-fused mountain for the integrated 5 extremes mountain first. Han Li murmured to himself before sweeping a sleeve toward the monstrous being in the secret chamber. A swath of golden light swept forth, and an incredible scene ensued. As the golden light descended upon the monstrous being, a burst of Buddhist chants suddenly rang out from within its body. Immediately thereafter, it disintegrated into countless golden runes of different sizes, as well as a cloud of black chi. The golden runes flashed and absorbed all of the golden light into Han Li's body, while the black chi surged before forming a pitch-black nascent soul that was several inches tall. This was none other than Han Li's second nascent soul, the nascent devil. At this moment, the nascent devil wore a smile on its face, and had donned the suit of heavenly devilish armor in a miniature form. Han Li smiled as he appraised the nascent devil before waving a hand toward it. Spiritual light instantly flashed from the nascent devil, and it disappeared into Han Li's body as a streak of black light. It turned out that, after using the precious materials gathered to manifest a substantial form for his golden projection, Han Li unintentionally discovered that his nascent devil could easily possess the golden body, and use the devilish chi within it to continue cultivating its profound yin devilish chi. At the same time, the second nascent soul could expel its nascent flames to refine this body, which was greatly beneficial to the manifestation of this golden body. In that case, Han Li was naturally more than happy to let it possess the projection. After all, his second nascent soul was virtually an independent being on its own, so he didn't have to expend any effort into guiding its cultivation or helping it control the golden body. It was just a pity that this nascent devil possessed quite a lowly cultivation base. If it could cultivate to somewhere around Han Li's current cultivation base, then possess the golden body, it would essentially be similar to an avatar for Han Li, which would naturally immensely enhance his combat prowess. For a normal being, it was of course extremely difficult to cultivate from the nascent soul stage all the way up to the spatial tempering stage. However, Han Li had already been through all that, so he could pass on all types of cultivation experiences to his second nascent soul. Furthermore, he had a virtually limitless supply of precious pills to feed the second nascent soul, so its cultivation was definitely progressing even faster than he was. Cultivation bottlenecks weren't exactly non-existent to nascent devils, but there was no doubt that it would be far easier for them to break through their bottlenecks than it was for normal cultivators. After all, the insights and enlightenment attained by a cultivator right before their breakthroughs were very useful resources. This was also why beings would begin to cultivate avatars, or second souls, after they'd reached a point in their cultivation, where they felt that it was quite difficult to progress any further. However, both refining avatars and second souls required the expenditure of vast amounts of effort and resources, and it was quite often the case that one would only achieve this objective after most of their remaining lifespan had been used up. This was why most cultivators would only cultivate 1 or 2 avatars, despite knowing the immense benefits that avatars could bring to them, and also why most avatars possessed inferior cultivation bases compared to the cultivators themselves. After all, they didn't have the mysterious small vial that Han Li possessed, which allowed him to infinitely nurture all of the spirit medicines he required at a vastly accelerated rate. After embroiling itself in the devilish chi within the golden body and taking many precious pills, the second nascent soul had already reached the pinnacle of the mid-nascent soul stage, and a breakthrough to the late nascent soul stage appeared to be imminent. However, seeing as the vast glacial realm was about to open, he decided to put a hold on the cultivation of his nascent devil. He was going to get the second nascent soul to make its breakthrough in the vast glacial realm. The immense abundance of spiritual chi in that realm would be far more effective against a mere nascent soul stage bottleneck than any precious pills or medicines. With that in mind, Han Li cast his gaze toward the other Han Li, and a peculiar light suddenly flashed through his eyes. Who would have thought that the body of the immortal Xianxia is an ideal material for refining an avatar? On top of that, the liquid in the mysterious small vial can be directly absorbed by this immortal Xianxia as pure spiritual power, thereby enhancing its magic power at a rapid rate. In just a few years, its magic power has reached the mid-spatial tempering stage, and bottlenecks simply don't apply to it. That's absolutely incredible. But then again, that does kind of make sense. A spirit medicine that has attained intelligence and a humanoid form like this immortal Xianxia had to have been in existence for countless years. During this process, it could only enhance its magic power slowly through constant accumulation. If it had to contend with bottlenecks as well, that would simply be far too unfair for it. The strange thing is, the ninth spirit ginseng has also attained sentience, but using the liquid on it will only replenish magic power without being able to enhance it any further. Could it be that only spirit beings like immortal Xianxias can absorb this spirit liquid? Or could it be that a spirit medicine can only attain this ability after they've actually manifested an alternate form with its true body rather than just its soul? And Li murmured to himself with furrowed brows before shaking his head. Who cares what the reason behind this is? The fact of the matter is that a brilliant opportunity has been placed right before me. I can refine this avatar into a replacement body, then use my nascent soul to possess it and use it in battle. After discovering that the spirit liquid in the mysterious small vial could enhance the immortal Xianxia's cultivation base, Han Li's thought process was very simple. He was going to keep using the spirit liquid to nurture this spirit body to see if it could attain body integration stage magic power in the end. Even though this would only result in a spirit body that simply possessed body integration stage magic power, but not actually an equivalent cultivation base, it would still be more powerful than his current body. If he were to then use his nascent soul to possess it, with all of the powerful abilities he'd mastered, he definitely wouldn't have to fear any body integration stage beings. Furthermore, there may not be an upper limit on the amount of magic power that this spirit body could attain. If he could nurture it to the point where it possessed grand ascension stage magic power, he'd virtually not have to fear anyone in the spirit realm. Of course, it was yet to be seen if that were actually possible. For some reason, he had a feeling that something that defied the natural order to such an extreme extent simply wasn't feasible. Perhaps he could only nurture this spirit body, though it possessed magic power equivalent to that of body integration stage beings or beings at the pinnacle of the spatial tempering stage. After all, after nurturing his golden lightning bamboo until it was 10,000 years old, the spirit liquid no longer proved to be effective on it. With this precedent, Han Li naturally wasn't confident that the immortal Xianxia would be able to absorb the spirit liquid without any upper limit. Furthermore, once the pure spiritual power converted from the spirit liquid accumulated to a certain degree, the power would have to be refined using the Danshan and the meridians, and this immortal Xianxia clearly wasn't capable of accomplishing that on its own. Thankfully, a flash of brilliance had occurred to him, and he'd thought of a way around this. With that in mind, a smile appeared on Han Li's face as he instructed the green Han Li. "Thanks for your hard work during this period of time, One. You can come about this body now. I won't be requiring you to continue refining the spiritual power within it for a while. During the next month, I'm going to stop the accelerated nurturing of all of the spirit medicines and infuse all of the spirit liquid into this spirit body to be converted into spiritual power. After that, you can slowly refine the spiritual power." "Yes, Master." A tender voice rang out from within the immortal Xianxia's body, following which it laid a hand onto the top of its own head. It then closed its eyes, and a ball of white light emerged from its body before transforming into a little girl who appeared to be around 6 to 7 years old. The little girl wore a snowy white dress and had 9 little black braids woven into her hair. She was extremely adorable. As soon as the little girl appeared, Han Li smiled and said, "You'll be entering the vast glacial realm with me, and I'll be taking your true body with me as well. Go back and rest now so you can prepare for the upcoming journey." "I can come as well, master." A pure and elated smile appeared on the little girl's face upon hearing this. "I don't know what's going to happen during this trip into the vast glacial realm, and your soul has already manifested a human form, so of course I can't just leave you here. If someone were to break into my cave abode in my absence, it would be a disaster," Han Li explained in a gentle manner. "That's great. For some reason, after I've become like this, not only is my brain a lot smarter than before, I also really want to see the outside world," the little girl said in a joyful manner. Letter 1D68F, letter 1D42B, letter 1D68T, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D568, letter 1D41E, letter 1D554, letter 1D428, letter 1D5FA. You've only just attained intelligence not long ago, so it's no surprise that you're curious about the outside world. However, you have to stay in the medicine garden during this period of time and make sure no one sees you. I'm expecting some visitors during the next month," Hanley cautioned in a serious manner. The little girl was quite frightened by the prospect of visitors coming to the cave abode, and she immediately replied in a timid and fearful manner, "All right, I'm going back to rest in the medicine garden right away." After that, her body blurred, and she shot forth as a streak of white light, vanishing into the ground in a flash. This little girl was naturally none other than the soul of the ninth spirit ginseng. The immortal Xianxia had told him that it was going to help the ninth spirit ginseng attain intelligence and also impart some knowledge. But much to Han Li's surprise, just 1 year after the immortal Xianxia's soul had been released to enter the cycle of reincarnation, the soul of the ninth spirit ginseng had transformed from the white rabbit into this little girl. It appeared that aside from just imparting some knowledge on the ninth spirit ginseng, the immortal Xianxia had to have also given it some immense benefits prior to its passing. Needless to say, Han Li was very glad to see this, and he gave ninth spirit ginseng the name Quer. After that, he discovered that Quer was also able to enter the body left behind by the immortal Xianxia and circulate the enormous magic power within it. This was perhaps due to the fact that she was also a spirit being of heaven and earth, just like the immortal Xianxia had been. In any case, during the spiritual power refinement process, Quer herself also benefited immensely from having her body immersed in such a vast amount of spiritual power. As such, he assigned her the duty of refining the spiritual power inside the immortal Xianxia's body. This decision had proven to be quite a wise one during the past 2 years, and Han Li was very pleased that this arrangement had worked so splendidly. After the little girl's departure, Han Li made a grabbing motion toward the immortal Xianxia's body from afar, and a burst of gray light immediately swept forth to envelop the spirit body. The body then quickly shrank to several inches in size amid flashes of purple light. The gray light carried it toward Han Li, and in the end, the spirit body disappeared up his sleeve. Having done all that, Han Li swept his gaze around his empty secret chamber before immediately turning around, then striding out the door. During the next month, Han Li frequently appeared in various large shops in Cloud City, purchasing some materials and rather uncommon treasures. As expected, Duan Tianren and Kaian Jizzi also came to visit him during this time, and all of them departed with pleased expressions on their faces after conversing with Han Li for around half a day each. A period of a month naturally wasn't very long, and it flew by in the blink of an eye. On this day, Han Li was meditating in the hall of his cave abode when a streak of red light suddenly flew in from outside, before revolving around him. He raised an eyebrow before raising a hand to draw the red light into his grasp, then injecting his spiritual sense into it to inspect its contents. "It's finally begun," Han Li murmured to himself before abruptly rising to his feet and making his way out of the cave abode. The Qin Quer is the same character as the Curl, part of the ninth spirit ginseng.